Chapter 66. Zhu Yao was about to cry. If this continued, she was going to die, and enter the palace 3 times. Yu Yan stood at the side, worriedly looking at his own disciple. Unfortunately, he was unable to help. The path of forming a nascent soul was extremely difficult, and many people had fallen in this path of cultivation. The success rate was less than 1 in 10,000. However, given his disciple's current situation, he had no choice but to form his nascent soul, and the tribulation lightning was the best opportunity. However, the tribulation lightning was simply too straightforward. He had been worried that the tribulation lightning would not be able to be drawn over, so he had planned to forcibly draw it over. Now, it seemed that there was no need for him to do anything. The tribulation lightning struck down one after another, as if it was a festival. He suddenly had some doubts. Was his disciple's unimaginable affinity with lightning spiritual energy good or bad? Zhu Yao was already a little numb from the pain, and her consciousness was growing blurry as well. She could only mechanically guide in spiritual energy. Gee! A crisp sound suddenly rang out from the bottom of his heart. It's the wood spirit. Shit, I forgot to take it out. It won't be crushed to death by the lightning spiritual energy, right? Zhu Yao worriedly looked into her body, only to see that at the corner of her divine sense, a tiny sapling was blankly looking at the large amount of lightning spiritual energy that had suddenly surged in. Zhu Yao wanted to take it out, but she no longer had the strength to do so. Zhu Yao suddenly felt a little guilty. She had let down the little wood spirit. Gee! The wood spirit seemed to have heard her inner thoughts. It shook its little branch, and suddenly flew out of that little corner. It stretched out 2 little vines, grabbed a wisp of lightning spiritual energy, and flew back into her divine sense. Like a little porter, he began to bustle back and forth. Zhu Yao, that it was actually not afraid of lightning spiritual energy. Could it be that it had stayed in his divine sense for a long time, and had already gotten used to it? With the addition of the wood spirit, the speed at which she absorbed spiritual energy became much faster. However, the heavenly lightning that was getting denser and denser was constantly charging her up. The wood spirit was a little anxious. 2 vines could no longer satisfy its needs, so it stretched out 4. That a touching porter. Zhu Yao silently gave it a thumbs up. Finally, he had spare energy to train his divine sense. In other words, cultivating the nascent soul. She could only use the lightning spiritual energy to continuously temper her divine sense. Time passed bit by bit, until her divine sense became more and more solid, slowly forming an embryonic form, like a small baby. The features became clearer and clearer. The pain in his body slowly subsided. The lightning elemental energy could enter freely without his guidance. Only then did she have the spare energy to look at the wood spirit. Wow, when did it grow into a tree? What happened to the little sapling? Could it be that it had grown up because it had come into contact with lightning spiritual energy? Chick, the wood spirit seemed to be extremely tired as it waved its thousands of vines. With a soft cry, she withdrew her vines and flew into the depths of her divine sense. Leaning against the side of her nascent soul, she stopped moving as if she had fallen asleep. You've worked hard, Zhu Yao silently muttered. She had formed her nascent soul, so the tribulation thunder had stopped and repaired her damaged meridians. Only then did she open her eyes. Looking around, it was not an exaggeration to say that the place was beyond recognition. There were scorch marks everywhere. If not for the formation that Master had set up in advance, this island would have been sunk. Yu Yan was standing 5 steps away from her. Master, I formed my nascent soul. Zhu Yao proudly waved her hands, feeling that she was really awesome. He looked her up and down, then nodded in satisfaction. His eyebrows relaxed. His brows relaxed, and he raised his head to look in the direction of Ancient Hill Sect. The tribulation clouds had already begun to dissipate. There was such a huge commotion just now. There was such a huge commotion earlier, and she believed that everyone in the sect had already sensed it. Once the tribulation clouds dissipate, they would definitely come to investigate. She had to think of a good plan to deal with it. Mistress, I'm back. Did you miss your cute beastie? Sesame popped out of nowhere and pounced towards Zhu Yao. Midway, It was slapped back by Yu Yan's palm. With a smack, its entire body was covered in black ash. Sesame crawled up with a wronged look, baring its teeth and roaring at Yu Yan. Then it changed back into the pitiful Zhu Yao. Mistress, he bullied me. You have to stand up for beastie. Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at it, recalling how the wood spirit was desperately helping her form her nascent soul earlier. Comparing the past and the past, this beast was completely a hindsight. Mistress, you formed your nascent soul. Sesame seemed to have just realized Zhu Yao's difference. Like a little puppy, it hopped around her a few rounds. That's great. I knew Mistress was incredible. Zhu Yao pinched its face and pulled it to the two sides. Why did you come back? It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Sesame shook its head and struggled out. Using its claws, it rubbed the side of its head. Didn't I miss Mistress? So the moment I recovered my spiritual energy, I immediately rushed back. Mistress, how can you be so heartless? I know how to be unreasonable. Zhu Yao pressed down on its head and used even more strength to rub its little head. Whoa, it hurts, it hurts. Sesame had nowhere to hide and could only be pinched by her. Tilting its head, it looked towards Yu Yan at the side and roared. Hey, 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 control your disciple. A certain person immediately ignored it. If his disciple was a little livelier, he completely had no objections. I wonder which fellow Taoist is casting a mystic art here. ZMO of Ancient Hill Sect has arrived. I wonder if Honored One is willing to meet me. The great patriarch of Ancient Hill Sect, ZMO, was a little distressed recently. An abnormality had occurred in the Tasiolux secret realm that opened once every 500 years, and out of the 50 or so disciples they sent, nearly half of them had perished. This was the greatest loss since the founding of the sect, but what worried him the most wasn't this. Rather, when he was doing a head count, he discovered that a female cultivator with an unknown back was missing. According to his direct disciple, it was a female cultivator named Steamed Bun. If he did not investigate, he would not have known, but once he did, even his soul was scared out of his body. This Bun was actually the little infant that his ancestral Grand Master brought back 10 years ago, the second disciple of Jade Forest Mountain. He didn't want to think about how this 10-year-old girl liked to play with her life. Just thinking about Grand Marshal Uncle's anger made him feel pain in his heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. Thinking about this Grand Marshal Uncle, I am a bit unlucky. For tens of thousands of years, he had been longing to take in a disciple. Now that he had finally gotten one, the disciple he took in would die one by one, and the disciple he took in would die one by one. He didn't even stop to breathe. He was starting to wonder if the other party was fated to be his. Apui. He thought about it for a whole day, but he didn't know how to explain it to Grand Marshal Uncle. Yet this troublesome matter just had to come again. Sovereign Feng Yi's disciple had suddenly formed his nascent soul after returning to the sect. Initially, this was a joyous occasion. Yet an anomaly happened during the tribulation. The tribulation lightning struck for a long time. Yet, not a single one of them struck the head of the nascent soul practitioner. Instead, it struck towards the east of Ancient Hill Sect, one after another, with an especially refreshing feeling. He had lived for so many years, yet, he had never seen a tribulation lightning strike that would deviate. And there was even an abnormal spiritual energy fluctuation coming from the east. ZMO was momentarily unable to sit still any longer. He called a few of his disciples and decided to personally take a look. It was definitely not to hide from his ancestral Grand Master. In the end, when he arrived at the descending point of the tribulation lightning, he realized that there were many exquisite formations set up there. Following the principle of using peaceful means before resorting to force, he roared out. He never expected that the person inside would actually open up the formations. ZMO looked inside, and when he clearly saw who was standing inside, his legs suddenly turned, and he had almost fallen from his flying sword. Grand Marshal Uncle. Why was this god here? He wasn't the least bit prepared. Wait a minute. Who was the handsome young man standing next to Grand Marshal Uncle? Grand Uncle Master seemed to be protecting him intentionally or unintentionally. Could it be that he was too shocked by the matter of his disciple and then accidentally went astray? In an instant, Zmo imagined a melodramatic story that moved him to tears. Yet, it could not be told to the world. No, there must be something wrong with his way of thinking. How could Grand-Uncle Master have such a hobby? Zmo silently looked towards that person who was not allowed to exist in the world. And to his shock, he realized that the other party was actually a nascent soul reverend. Grand Marshal Uncle really has high standards. After asking, he found out that the other party was a wandering practitioner. Initially, he wanted to join Ancient Hill Sect, but coincidentally, when he passed by this island, he discovered this 9th-ranked demonic beast. When he was no match for it, fortunately, his Grand Marshal Uncle arrived and attracted the Tribulation Lightning, helping him subdue the demonic beast. The Wan clan's Grand Marshal Uncle, who rarely went out, actually took the initiative to save them? Who is this young man? Why does he have so much face? As expected, the relationship between these two people was definitely not simple, right? Zmo looked at the mountain-like demonic beast standing behind the two of them. After a closer inspection, he realized that it was actually a 9th-ranked demonic beast. It was no wonder he had to guide the Tribulation Lightning over to help him subdue it. But why did he have to help an outsider subdue it? And he even gave it to him so easily. This was a 9th-ranked demonic beast that was equivalent to an early-stage demigod. 9th-ranked. What happened to the promise of keeping the goodies within the family? Even if the other party was you're not allowed to exist in the world. This was a little too, not allowed to exist in the world. Right. Zmo sighed deeply. Just as he was about to tactfully express his dissatisfaction towards his Grand Marshal Uncle. However, the other party simply turned to look at the youth behind him. Without leaving behind a single word of explanation, with a swoosh, he flew away by himself. Zmo. Who asked him to take up the job of cleaning up messes. However, after thinking that the other party was here to rely on Ancient Hill Sect, in the future, they would be on the same side. Naturally, the 9th-ranked demonic beast would be on the same side as well. Zmo felt relieved again, and with a courteous look, he invited this youth who looked even younger than him back. The age of practitioners of Foundation and above could not be judged by their appearance. Although the other party looked like a youth, Zmo, who was experienced and knowledgeable, did not dare to refer to himself as an elder. Furthermore, this person could very possibly be the not allowed to exist in the world that his Grand Marshal Uncle mentioned. I wonder what is Reverend's Taoist name? Zhuya was startled for a moment. Back then, when Zmo spoke, she had already guessed why her master wanted Sesame to return to its original form. Hence, she made up a bunch of nonsense. Other than the fact that her identity as a wandering practitioner was something she thought of on the spur of the moment. Evidently, her master was very dissatisfied with the latter point, which was why he left in a huff. That's right, he left in a huff, though she was the only one who could see it. I have yet to choose a Taoist name. Zhu chuckled. My surname is Jiang, and my given name is Yu, so it's fellow Taoist Jiang. Zmo courteously smiled. After inquiring about the other party's identity, he was finally at ease. Even Zhu Yao's name was superficial, so naturally, the other information she provided was even more superficial. Chapter 67. Naturally, Zmo would not mind about these either. It was a common occurrence for wandering practitioners to seek refuge with a sect. However, it was extremely hard to rope in a nascent soul reverend. Usually, the lives of wandering practitioners were extremely difficult, and there were even fewer who could cultivate to the nascent soul realm. All of them were used to doing things their own way, and no longer wished to be bound by a sect. Therefore, if a nascent soul perfected one wanted to join a sect, only a fool would not agree. And other than the Mountain Lords, there were only a few dozen nascent soul reverends in Ancient Hill Sect. With one more, their position would be even more stable. For a spiritual master to choose to join Ancient Hill Sect, it's our sect's greatest honor. I wonder which mountain does spiritual master intend to join? I've never thought of that. Zhu Yao honestly replied. Then do you have any specialties? For example, concocting pills, refining weapons, crafting talismans, and so on. Pellet refinement, artifact refinement, talisman creation. Zhu Yao lowered her head and pondered for a moment, before replying with a stern look. I don't know any of them. Zemo's legs turned, and he almost fell. Is there anyone who shows off their incompetence in such a righteous manner? The corner of his lips twitched a few times, and Zemo's face instantly darkened. No matter how hard a Yuanying Xiuzha cultivated, it would take at least 100 years before they could form a nascent soul. 100 years wasn't enough to be proficient, but it was enough to learn a skill. She actually didn't know anything. How did he survive? Then which peak do you want to build your abode on? Could she say Jade Forest Mountain? After all, they had lived here for so many years, and had developed feelings for each other. But, looking at Zemo's expression, if he were to speak the truth, he would be beaten to death, right? I do have some experience in taming beasts, and I happen to have a 9th-ranked demonic beast. Why don't we go to the Taming Beast Peak? What do you think, Head? Very well. Zemo had initially planned on doing so as well. Thus, he quickly sent a disciple to inform the master of the Command Beast Peak, to prepare a new abode to welcome the new elder. Then he reported this matter to the other peaks. While he was at it, he also informed everyone that Xiao Yi had successfully broken through to Nascent Soul, and chose to inform the various clans and sections. The promotion ceremony was held. Ancient Hill Sects suddenly had 2 Nascent Soul Stage Elders, and Zemo felt that he could finally have a good sleep tonight. Oh right, there's still a 9th-ranked demonic beast. Zhu Yao was very satisfied with her new residence. Compared to the straw cottage on Jade Forest Mountain, the current cave residence was simply like a palace. Not only were there 3 3-story buildings, but there was also a courtyard in the front, and a lawn in the back. There was also a big garden in the middle with a small bridge, and flowing water. Her room was in the innermost building at the other end of the garden. She heard that the first 2 buildings were for her future disciples. With her death every 3 days, with the attribute of 1 death every 5 days, he could only use it to collect corpses. It seemed like that place would be empty forever. Ancient Hill Sect's treatment towards its elders was still very good. Almost every mountain had 1 or 2 nascent soul stage elders, and usually, they did not have to manage the affairs of the sect. Naturally, there were the various peak masters in charge, and the sect had a fixed supply. However, if there was a major event in the sect that required the elders to appear, the sect would not be polite. Actually, she had her own plans for choosing the beast taming peak, because this peak was located at the southwest, and the one with the highest cultivation was not the peak lord, but Sovereign Feng Yi, who lived at the peak. Xiao Yi's master was also the most important member of his harem. Initially, according to the trajectory in her dream, Xiao Yi would only form his nascent soul 50 years after he left the secret realm. And during the lightning tribulation, he encountered a heart demon tribulation, and only succeeded in forming his nascent soul after going through a narrow escape from death. However, because of this, he was heavily injured, and when he almost had to delete his account and start over again, he was saved by her own master using the water spirit. That's right, it was the divine dragon that could be summoned by gathering 5 of them. Apui. It was one of the 5 spirits that could welcome the end of the world, the water spirit. She did not know why the water spirit was in Sovereign Feng Yi's hands. Even more so, she did not know why she had to wait until her disciple was almost dead, and had only a single breath left, before taking it out to save him. Because the main point of the dream was, because Feng Yi needed to heal her disciple's injuries with her naked body. Back and forth, this cold-hearted and emotionless flower of a high mountain was taken down by Xiao Yi so easily. And then, while she was healing him, she even developed some unhealthy, disharmonious, and indescribable movements. Of course, these were all the original trajectories. However, the truth was Xiao Yi formed his nascent soul 50 years earlier, and the lightning tribulation that should have happened was lured over by her, causing his butt to split open. Not only did he not have the heart demon tribulation that should have happened, he even smoothly and painlessly formed his nascent soul. Thinking about everything she had done, the first time, in order to save someone, she killed a fox demon, she died, and then Xiao Yi formed his nascent soul. The second time, she stopped the metal spirit from going berserk, Saved someone, she died again. And Xiaoyi formed his nascent soul. The hell, she's Xiaoyi's cheat, right? Compared to her, metal spirits and whatnot were basically weak. Alright? Knowing the truth, tears fell. Zhu Yao decided to return to the house and eat a packet of spicy gluten to calm herself down. She wondered if her little life expert, her master, would do it. Zhu Yao was woken up by Zidan early in the morning. Zidan was the beast-taming mountain lord, and his biggest hobby was to rear demonic beasts on his own mountain. Unless it was necessary, he would not go out. Hence, she was not really familiar with him in the past. Zidan was riding on an awe-inspiring and imposing pig. That's right. The mount of the mighty beast-taming mountain lord was actually a wild boar. Zidan treasured this pig-like demonic beast very much. Every day, he ate and slept with it, and even his own figure had grown horizontally along with it. That's right, the beast-taming mountain lord was a fatty, a living fatty that weighed at least 150 kilograms. When this fatty jumped down from the boar beast and sprinted towards her, she suddenly had the misconception that the earth and mountains were shaking. Little brother. Zidan smiled like a chrysanthemum, sprinting all the way over. Raising his leg, he forcefully stepped over the doorstep and stuffed his body into her house. Stuck. He was actually stuck in the door. Little brother. Zidan's chrysanthemum-like smile froze as he reached out his claw towards her for help. Help big brother a little. Zhu Yao sighed. Accepting her fate, she grabbed onto his hand and pulled out the radish. After much difficulty, she pulled him out from the door. Zidan poured a cup and swallowed it in one gulp. I say, little brother, I have long told you to change to a wider door, but you just wouldn't listen. You're stuck in the door. So you're blaming me now? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Senior Marshal Brother Zidan, why are you here? Alright, I almost forgot. Zidan slapped on his thigh, and his fats instantly trembled. I'm here to call you over to the promotion ceremony. You're new here, so to prevent the awkwardness of being alone, it's best that you come with me. So Xiao Yi's promotion ceremony was today. Zhu Yao was instantly a little interested. Hurry, the various clans and sects have arrived. We're the main house, it's not good to be late. As he said that, he even pushed her. Since that's the case, thank you, Senior Marshal Brother. Let's go then. Zhu Yao thought about water spirit and walked out without any hesitation. After a few steps, she suddenly heard Zidan's voice again. Little brother. Zidan once again reached out his claw and weakly said, Help big brother again. He's stuck again. Zhu Yao. That forming a nascent soul was an extremely important step in cultivation, and the path of cultivation was extremely difficult. Firstly, spirit veins were the entrance tickets to enter the cultivation world. Anyone with spirit veins would be able to guide spiritual energy into their body and reach the stage of essence. However, only 1 out of 100 essence practitioners would be able to successfully build their foundation, and out of 1,000 foundation practitioners, only 1 or 2 would be able to reach the Azoth core realm. However, after Sovereign Yu Yen, there was another person in Ancient Hill sect who was able to successfully form his nascent soul in a mere 100 years. This news caused the various clans and sects to grit their teeth in hatred. However, the other party was the #1 deity sect. No matter how much they clenched their teeth in the depths of their hearts, they had to swallow it down. They were giving enough face to participate in their promotion ceremony. But in reality, it was just a show-off. When Zhu Yao arrived at the Great Hall, everyone had already arrived. The interior was not decorated with lanterns and streamers like the outside, and the people standing inside were all nascent soul stage practitioners in the sect, the mountain lords of the various mountains, and a few nascent soul stage elders. What was rare was that the 3 sovereigns were present as well, and the one sitting at the very center was none other than Sovereign Feng Yi. She still had the arrogant look of a flower on a high mountain, and she did not even glance at him, this stranger who had suddenly appeared. Xiao Yi stood behind her. Amen. The bug word on his face was still as fresh and refined as ever. ZMO, however, was very passionate towards him, and immediately walked over. Then he introduced him, the new elder who possessed a 9th-ranked demonic beast, to the few elders who did not usually appear. When the people present heard this, their initially cold attitudes instantly turned passionate. Zhu Yao silently felt that she seemed to be even inferior to a beast. Taoist Hong Cho, however, did not mind at all. She lightly glanced at her, snorted coldly, and then turned back. Her face was filled with disdain. What happened to the promised true love? In the past, when she was still a baby, she brought her to look at the stars and the moon, and called her little Tian Tian. Now that she had changed her avatar, she snorted coldly at her. What an evil Lilicon. So it's Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. This humble one is Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi walked over and courteously bowed to her. In the cultivation world, strength ranked Senior Marshal Brother. Both of them were at the early stages of nascent soul, and their positions were equal. However, he had a demigod stage master, yet he called her Senior Marshal Brother. He was giving her plenty of face, and even ZMO nodded satisfyingly at him, feeling that he understood the big picture. However, a hint of dissatisfaction flashed past Feng Yi's face, and an instant later, she returned to her expressionless face. Newcomers had to be given some face after all. Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, since he had sent himself to her doorstep, naturally, she had no reason not to step on it. So your Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, who had just formed his nascent soul. Congratulations, Junior Marshal Brother Xiao. With a few words, she had firmly secured her position as a Senior Marshal Brother. The corner of Xiao Yi's lips twitched for a moment, and he immediately covered it up. After exchanging a few pleasantries with her, he once again returned to stand behind Feng Yi. He looked like a well-dressed person. Though Zhu Yao had carefully observed his appearance, yet, she felt that something was amiss no matter how she looked at him. Ever since the wood spirit had followed her, her senses towards wood spiritual energy had become especially strong. However, currently, she could not sense even the slightest bit of wood spiritual energy from his body. Wasn't he a metal and wood dual spirit veins holder? Chapter 68. Now that he thought about it, it was highly possible. If a disciple with multiple spiritual roots wanted to advance, he or she would have to absorb the spiritual energy of his or her own spiritual roots at the same time. Double spiritual roots would require him to absorb 2 types of spiritual energy, while triple spiritual roots would require him to absorb 3 types of spiritual energy. He had the metal and wood spirit roots, but because of the metal spirit's rampage, he could only absorb the metal spirit chi. He didn't have the wood spirit to help him absorb the wood spirit chi. If he wanted to form his nascent soul, he had to wash away his useless wood spirit root. The main character was the main character after all. There were benefits everywhere. Thinking back to the time when he hid the Heaven Pulse Lotus from the demonic beasts, his body was riddled with holes, and he almost lost his life. But in the end, she was the one who benefited from it. She really was second mother's daughter, right? It was definitely true. Seeing that everyone had arrived, ZMO instructed to open the palace doors, and welcomed the fellow Taoists from the various sects and clans who came to congratulate them. In less than a moment, along with a loud announcement, many people from various sects came in one after another. There were nascent soul elders of various sects, and there were also various elite disciples who ran errands. All of them came with generous gifts. First, he bowed towards Feng Yi and the other 2 sovereigns in front of him. Xiao Yi, who was at the side, came out to say a few courteous words, and then, he was brought away by the disciples arranged by the sect master. The process was monotonous and monotonous. Zhu Yao felt extremely bored watching it, and her smile had even stiffened. However, as a nominal elder, he had the obligation to maintain appearances. She didn't even have to pee anymore, because after she built her foundation, she wouldn't be responsible for eating, drinking, and defecating anymore. After this boring exchange of politeness lasted for 6 hours, she finally understood why her master hated participating in the sex group activities so much. I'm so bored. I really want something to happen. Even a catfight would do. Suddenly, with a loud bang, the ground shook violently. Zhu Yao, who was bored to the point that mushrooms were growing on her, did not sit stably, and had almost slipped down. Holy shit. Something really happened. God, if you satisfy me like this, I will be willful. This strange shaking lasted for a quarter of an hour before it stopped. Apart from the nascent soul cultivators, who were still sitting in their original positions, most of the other disciples were shaken to the point of staggering. The scene was chaotic. Silence. A wave of nascent soul stage pressure covered the entire hall. Only then did everyone at the scene quiet down. Zmo stood at the center and said with a sunken voice, "What happened? Sect Master." A disciple rushed in, panic still on his face. The Grand Mountain Protecting Array. For some reason it suddenly collapsed. The Great Mountain Barrier Formation was the strongest line of defense in Ancient Hill Sect. Zemo's expression paled, and in a flash his figure flew out. The expressions of the various mountain lords present were a little ugly as well. All of them followed suit. As a nominal elder he was no exception. He followed the crowd to the square outside the main peak. Raising his head, he saw that the originally blue sky was suddenly shaking. A layer of something like a transparent membrane was dissipating piece by piece, as if it was being torn apart inch by inch. Zmo deeply frowned. He was both shocked and furious. He summoned the disciple who was guarding the formation core. "Just who dares to destroy our Ancient Hill Sect's Great Mountain Barrier Formation? This disciple doesn't know." The disciple cupped his hands and replied, "Before the formation collapsed, no one has appeared around the eye of the formation." "Are you certain there isn't a single person here?" Zmo asked. The disciple thought for a moment, then firmly shook his head. Apart from this disciple, no one else appeared. Zmo sank into silence. The Great Mountain Barrier Formation of Ancient Hill Sect was known as the #1 formation in the cultivation world, because this formation was not someone else's. It was set up by that person on Jade Forest Mountain, in the current cultivation world, other than himself. Basically, no one had the ability to forcefully break the formation, unless the formation core was destroyed. However, today, in front of the various sects and clans, Ancient Hill Sect was slapped in the face. If they did not find out the reason, they would become the joke of the cultivation world from then on. "Senior Marshal Brother, the formation is about to completely collapse. It's more important to protect the formation first." Ziyuan took a step forward and reminded the furious Zmo. Only then did Zmo swallow his anger and turn to instruct the disciple beside him. "Hurry, go to Jade Forest Mountain and invite your ancestral grand uncle over." While gesturing to the few mountain lords and nascent soul elders to cast their arts together, stabilize the formation, and prevent it from continuing to collapse. When Zhu took action, she finally understood why this formation was known as the #1 formation in the cultivation world. The huge demand for spiritual energy was basically not something she could compare with. The moment she injected spiritual energy, it was like a drop of water entering the ocean, completely ineffective. Initially, she was filled with confidence towards her own cultivation, but in an instant, she was slapped in the face by the cruel reality. Just when she was about to be unable to hold on any longer, the disciple who went to invite Yu Yin returned alone, with an expression that looked as though he was about to cry. Reporting to Sect Master, Ancestral Grand Uncle has activated the formation of Jade Forest Mountain. This disciple is unable to enter. Then where's the communication paper crane? The paper crane can't enter either. Zhu Yao silently darkened. Just what was her master trying to do? Zmo, who was already in a terrible predicament in the first place, felt even worse. This ancestral grand uncle's personality was hard to deal with in the first place, and after he took in a disciple, he became a little better. Just as he was about to return to normal, 2 of his disciples died in a row. He could understand if he threw a fit, but why did he have to do it at this critical juncture? Zmo even wanted to cry for him to see. Just when he did not know what to do, he suddenly glanced at the elegant and handsome youth at the side. In an instant he thought of a plan. "Young man who cannot be seen in the world, the time for Ancient Hill Sect to need you has arrived." Zhu Yao suddenly felt a chill down her spine, and when she turned her head, she coincidentally bumped into Zmo's strange gaze. What was this old man trying to do? "I said cannot be seen in." Ahem, Junior Marshal Brother Jiang. He almost let it slip. Zmo faked a few coughs and protected the situation. "I believe you have a bit of a relationship with my ancestral grand uncle. Why don't I trouble you to go and invite him over? Oh, if you want to invite him over, then so be it. What's with that constantly twitching expression of yours? It's not a problem for me to make a trip over, but if I were to pull back, I'm afraid the Great Mountain Barrier Formation will. Zemo's expression darkened, and only then did he think of this. With so many of their nascent soul practitioners channeling their spiritual energy into the formation, they were only able to delay the formation from collapsing so quickly. Otherwise, the entire ancient hill sect would have long fallen into the ocean. If one of them were to pull back at the last moment, then it would definitely be over. This sovereign is coming. A cold female voice resounded. Zhu Yao turned to look, and behind her were 3 demigod sovereigns. The one who spoke was actually Sovereign Feng Yi. Zmo was startled, as though he had just recalled that the 3 sovereigns were here as well. He silently wiped off his cold sweat. There was no helping it. The 3 of them had not been in charge for too long, and he had even forgotten that they were demigods. I'll have to trouble the 3 sovereigns. With the addition of the 3 demigod sovereigns, the collapsing formation instantly stabilized, though the damage was still very great. Feng Yi waved her hand at Zhu Yao, and Zhu Yao simply felt as though she was instantly repelled by a surge of energy, as she pulled back her spiritual energy. Go and do what you need to do, Feng Yi coldly said. She did not even turn her head back, and her expression was as prideful as it could get. Zhu Yao rubbed her nose, and just as she was planning to swiftly run to Jade Forest Mountain to drag her master out, a sudden change occurred. A few dozen steps away, at the formation core which was still calm earlier, a black smoke suddenly emitted out. The smoke was especially thick, yet it did not dissipate in the surroundings. Instead, it slowly condensed into a shape, and actually formed into gigantic demonic beasts, and there were actually dozens of them. Roars instantly resounded through the clouds. 6th-ranked demonic beasts. The entire place instantly sank into chaos. Disciples of ancient hill sect, follow me into battle. Xiao Yi, who was the only one who did not take action to maintain the formation, shouted out loudly. Releasing his own pressure, the entire place finally calmed down. Casually summoning his own sword, he swung it and slashed towards the demonic beast closest to him. Zhu Yao's footsteps were instantly restrained as well. Summoning her spiritual sword, she activated the sword formation and charged towards the demonic beast, which was charging towards the people maintaining the formation. However, this demonic beast was exceptionally strange. With a single slash from her, it actually reverted back into a cloud of black smoke. Looking around, not a single one of the fallen demonic beasts would turn into smoke. Just what kind of demonic beast was this? And these demonic beasts seemed to have already found their targets, as they crazily attacked the few people who were maintaining the formation and could not move. And amongst these few people, she was the one who was the closest, and her cultivation was the highest. Although 6th-ranked demonic beasts were nothing to her, she could not handle a huge number of them. Zhu Yao gritted her teeth, and had no choice but to call Sesame out. Sesame, clear the area. Roar, roar. The moment Sesame came out, it instantly sat on a demonic beast and killed it. With a sweep of its tail, it scattered another one. Then, it complacently turned its head and glanced at her. Meow. Meow, your sister. Be a proper beast. Why do you have to meow like a cat? Although Sesame had suppressed his cultivation, and looked like he was only a 9th-ranked demonic beast, after all, he was still an 11th-ranked demonic beast. Fighting 6th-ranked demonic beasts was like cutting vegetables. With its addition, the situation instantly turned around, and they were finally able to protect the people who could not move. Zhu Yao instantly heaved a sigh of relief. However, she suddenly heard a strange laughter coming from behind, and she suddenly had a bad premonition. Ha 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 ha, I finally found a chance. Zhu Yao turned to look, only to see the black smoke which the demonic beast she killed had turned into was currently gathering together. It actually gathered into the form of a man, and coincidentally stopped right behind Feng Yi. Crap. Before Zhu Yao could even warn her, that man had already made his move. A palm carrying a dense black miasma had already struck towards Feng Yi. Feng Yi instantly puked out a mouthful of blood, and before she could even retaliate, she had already collapsed. Everything happened in an instant, and basically, no one was able to react in time. Before Zhu Yao could even turn around, Feng Yi had already collapsed. "Master!" Xiao Yi shouted out in fear. He wanted to rush over, however, he was heavily blocked by demonic beasts. That man, however, did not allow Feng Yi to collapse onto the ground. Instead, he held onto her body with extreme gentleness and carefully pulled her into his embrace. Lowering his head, using his face which was filled with black scars, he buried it into the side of her neck. With a light murmur, just like how he appeared, together with Feng Yi, he turned into strands of black smoke and disappeared. The man's voice was very soft, yet it was enough for the nascent soul practitioners present to hear it clearly. What he said was, "I finally obtained you." In Zhu Yao's mind, 3 words instantly popped out: brain-dead fan. Chapter 69. This inexplicable battle ended in an inexplicable manner. Although there were no cannon fodder casualties on our side, we lost a soul formation cultivator. To be precise, he was captured. Because Feng Yi was abducted, the formation once again began to collapse. Zhu Yao had no choice but to bitterly hold on. The consumption of this formation was simply too great, and she was about to be sucked dry. ZMO silently sent out a life-saving gaze. Zhu Yao felt like crying. "Don't look at me, I can't leave now either. Don't tell me I have to shout?" He could give it a try. "Sovereign Yu Yen, save me." Zhu Yao instantly possessed Aunt Shue's body. "Sovereign, hurry and come out, come out, come out, come out. Don't hide in there, I know you're home." If he didn't come, she was going to die. When her words fell, a white light flashed, and the cold-looking Yu Yen was already standing in front of her. Holy shit, it really came out. Not only Zhu Yao, even ZMO was startled. He never expected that his junior martial brother's screams would actually be able to invite him down. He was indeed Grand Martial Uncle's intolerable to the world. Definitely. Yu Yen coldly glared at his own disciple. His face, which did not have much warmth in the first place, was currently overflowing with an even colder aura. "Mas, Lord." Zhu Yao was frightened by him, and had almost exposed herself. She could only chuckle and give him a silly smile. "Disciple Jiang Yu greets Sovereign." Zhu Yao obediently called out, and emphasized on the word disciple. Yes, only then did Yu Yen nod his head, and his expression softened a little. He was already displeased to be called over by his disciple so early in the morning, and yet his stupid disciple, for the sake of a stupid plan, was not even willing to acknowledge him as her master. He really should be angry. Zhu Yao's words reminded the crowd, and a series of greetings resounded. Disciple greets Martial Granduncle. Greetings, Grand Martial Granduncle. However, he didn't respond to anyone. He raised his head and looked at the sky, at the array formation that had been damaged beyond recognition. Grand Martial Uncle. ZMO retracted his shock and recalled the matter at hand. The Great Mountain Barrier formation of Ancient Hill Sect was destroyed by someone, and even after using all of our strength, we were still unable to stop the formation from collapsing. I hope that Grand Martial Uncle can repair it in time. He saved my sect from danger. Yu Yen nodded. Forming a seal with a single hand, he then waved his hand. The array formation that had been continuously absorbing everyone's spiritual power instantly stopped and stopped collapsing. All the spellcasters were bounced back. Zhu Yao and her little companions were all dumbfounded. How did Master do it? What kind of seal was that? Why was it so powerful? Teach me, teach me, teach me. His eyes sparkled as he looked at his master. Unfortunately, he was ignored. Yu Yen simply reached out his hand and stuffed a paper bag into Zhu Yao's hands. The formation core at the bottom of the lake has been damaged. Yu Yen simply gave a simple explanation before turning into a ray of white light and flying towards the bottom of the lake. Zhu Yao blankly grabbed onto the paper bag her own master forcefully stuffed into her hands and opened it to take a look. The shape of the strip was bright red. It was actually spicy strips. Why did he give her a bag of spicy sticks? Wait a minute. 2 days ago, because she couldn't sleep on her bed, she seemed to have gone crazy and asked her master if he knew how to make spicy gluten. After receiving a negative answer, he seemed to have casually explained the method of doing it. Then the reason why Master went into seclusion this time was, the answer was too devastating. Master, tell me honestly, what level do you want to train your life skills to? The promotion ceremony ended with a slap to the face. In regards to the kidnapping of the higher-ups this time, the other higher-ups of Ancient Hill Sect held an emergency meeting. They could not afford to lose this face, so they had to return the favor. Firstly, the meeting confirmed a suspect, a man who had been in love with Sovereign Feng Yi since 1,000 years ago. Name Chen Zhe. Class, heretic practitioner. Nascent soul paragon. This person had always been in love with Sovereign Feng Yi, however. Because of the repeated rejections, hatred grew in his heart. Using this promotion ceremony as an opportunity, he created chaos and kidnapped the sovereign. This action was outrageous, and had even violated the fundamental principle of free love in the cultivation world. He should receive the condemnation of society, and be severely punished by the heavenly Tao. The other higher-ups of Ancient Hill Sect expressed their anger towards this action, and urgently formed a small investigation team. They must capture this criminal. Oh no, settle him on the spot. And rescue the innocent victim, Sovereign Feng Yi. Zhu Yao expressed 120% support for this action. However, Mama's egg, why me? What's the meaning of sending her there? In regards to this action, student ZMO, the president of Ancient Hill Sect's highest leadership committee, gave the following explanation. Little brother Jiang. ZMO patted on her shoulders and said to her with a heavy tone, you saw the situation back then as well. It happened too quickly, and you were the only one who saw the other party's face clearly. Furthermore, Sovereign Feng Yi should be severely injured right now, and you're also a wood spirit vein holder just like Sovereign, so you're the best at healing Sovereign's injuries. Zhu Yao gave a face. Why did she have to say that she was a wood spirit vein holder just to hide her identity? Was it too late to regret now? Don't worry, as long as Sovereign's injuries are healed, I believe that no matter how powerful that heretic practitioner is, he won't be able to do anything to you. Who said he couldn't do anything to them? Earlier, weren't they toying around with a bunch of nascent soul and demigods? Zhu Yao could not help but roll her eyes. Sovereign Feng Yi, I'll leave it to you then. Before she could resist, ZMO had already made the final decision. The special operation team to rescue Sovereign Feng Yi was officially formed by Zhu Yao, beast-taming mountain lord Zidan, and Feng Yi's disciple Xiao Yi. The plan was to head towards the base of the heretic practitioner, Yutsong City, which was close to the desolate lands, inquire about Chunzi's location, and proceed with the rescue. Sovereign Yi ran formed hand seals with both of his hands, and straightforwardly opened a teleportation door. It's hard to determine the location of Yutsong City. To prevent you from going the wrong way, this sovereign will directly send the three of you out of the city. Remember, that's the territory of heretic practitioners. You must be cautious with your words and actions. Before Zhu Yao could even express her opinion, she was already pulled towards the teleportation door by the hot-blooded Zidan. Wait a minute, I haven't. She had yet to agree to it, hey. At the very least, let her inform her master first, right? Unfortunately, no matter how much strength she used, she was unable to pull a fatty. The scenery in front of her changed, and the three of them were already standing on a patch of barren land. Zhu Yao, that she had not said a single word from the start to the end. Why was she sent to carry out such a dangerous mission? The worst thing was turning her head. She glanced at her eternal piggy teammate Xiao Yi, and really wanted to cry. This time, she would die as well, right? She definitely would, right? She did not know if Xiao Yi was really a bug, but he definitely had a buff called All Party Members Die on him, and it especially had a 100% increase in damage towards her. At that moment, she felt that living was really sad. Little brother, hurry and look. Fatty Zidan used his thick and sturdy arm to push Zhu Yao. Being pushed by his huge body, Zhu Yao was unable to stand far away, and was almost pushed flat on her face. The fatty pointed to the front and said, that should be Yutsong City, right? Zhu Yao silently took 2 steps back, maintaining a safe distance. Following his finger, she looked over, and about a kilometer in front of them, there was an ancient city. The city walls looked to be filled with holes, and it gave off a very ancient feeling. However, the entire city was floating in midair. Occasionally, there would be groups of people, riding on various demonic beast mounts, or using various strange mystic tools to fly to the city gates and enter the city. Let's immediately go inquire about Master's news, Xiaoyi anxiously said, and summoned his flying sword with a wave of his hand. Wait a minute. Zhu Yao stopped him. You can't fly on a sword. Xiao Yi's expression changed, and just as he was about to flare up, Zidan however smiled. Zidan however said with a smile, little brother Jiang is right. He pointed to the people who were entering the city. This is the gathering place of heretic practitioners, and only deity practitioners specialize in using swords. If you fly on a sword, your identity as a deity practitioner will immediately be exposed. Didn't you realize that among the people who entered the city, not a single one of them flew on a sword? Only then did Xiao Yi calm down, and kept the flying sword in his hand. My contracted spiritual beast, however, can do it. Zidan summoned his own mount. That's right, it was that pig. Little brother Jiang, if you don't mind, let me give you a ride? Zidan sat on his own pig, and stretched out a passionate pig trotter towards her. She despised it. All right. She had never ridden a pig in her entire life, so it seemed like she could endure it. But junior martial brother Xiao, I'll fly on a mystic tool. Xiaoyi took out a jade flute, and transformed it into a size that could allow him to stand on it. When he stood on it, he instantly had the misconception that he looked like an immortal. As expected of a flute, it was a powerful tool for picking up girls. All right, let us enter the city, Zidan announced. With a wave of his hand, his fat body bent down and squeezed Zhu Yao down. Zhu Yao. Xiao Yi. The hell, what happened to the promised two-person mount? Oh ho ho. Zidan's face was filled with disdain. I'm sorry, little brother. I forgot to have my spiritual beast change its size. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Then why the hell did you invite me up for? My buttocks, yo. Oh, it hurts. Zidan had the demonic beast beneath him grow to twice its original size, and only then did Zhu Yao once again climb up. With a lingering fear in her heart, she sat a little further away. There was no helping it. After all, she was penniless, and with the setting of constantly reviving, it was destined that no matter what kind of treasure it was, it would always be a one-time consumable item to her. Currently, other than a normal spiritual sword, she did not even have a single mystic tool on her. Initially, she had wanted to plunder a few from her master, but no one gave her the chance. 2 subdued beasts, and 1 flew on a mystic tool. A moment later, the little rescue squad had already arrived at Yutsong City. Approaching closer, this city looked even more ancient. On the city walls, there were traces left behind from battles in several places. However, on the city walls, there were various strange symbols engraved everywhere, densely covering the entire city walls. Zidan explained to her that the symbols on the city walls were engravings from the ancient era. They were engraved on the walls surrounding Yutsong City, and no one knew who left them behind. However, the strength of the engravings was unbreakable. There was no restriction on exiting the entire city, but entering the city, there was only one entrance, the city gate. Only exiting and not entering, it could be said that this was a city that no one could break through. This was also the reason why, even though all of the deity sects knew that heretic practitioners were gathered in Yutsong City, no one came to attack. Who is it? Just as they approached the city gate, a one-eyed heretic practitioner with a sinister face cautiously asked, as he sized up the 3 of them from head to toe, "Why did you come to Yutsong City?" Chapter 70. The 3 of them were startled. This person looked like a guard of the city gate. Why did he stop them without anyone stopping them? We're here to avoid vengeance, Zhu Yao said with a quick mind. Avoid vengeance. This person was the heretic practitioner who guarded the gate. He glanced at the 3 unfamiliar faces in front of him. What vengeance? Naturally, it's the deity sect. So it's another idiot who offended a deity sect, and is here to seek self-protection. The heretic practitioner laughed in disdain. Do you know the password? Password? Zhu Yao was completely dumbfounded. Only a ghost would know what password. Wait a minute, it couldn't be. Open sesame? Roar, roar. Before the guard could reply, Sesame had already jumped out on its own. Its two eyes looked at Zhu Yao excitedly. Mistress, you called me? Zhu Yao. On the contrary, the guard did not seem to be afraid in the slightest. He glanced at Sesame and said with an understanding look, "Oh, so you're beast practitioners? With the lousy things you've done, it's no wonder you're being chased by the deity sect. Go on in, don't waste this old man's time." "Thank you, little brother." Although she did not understand why, it was great to be able to enter. Zhu Yao quickly called Sesame back, kept it into the spiritual beast pouch her master made for her, and brought the other two into the city. Zidan explained to her that the so-called beast practitioners were heretic practitioners who used the corpses of spiritual beasts to refine them into corpses that could be controlled and used to attack. However, this art was a little lacking in morals, because the corpses of regular demonic beasts could not be used to refine them. Spiritual beasts that had already been tamed by humans had to be used. However, beast practitioners were not fated with demonic beasts. Because they often refined beast corpses, their bodies carried a scent that demonic beasts especially hated, which would cause demonic beasts to go crazy, let alone tame them. Hence, beast practitioners could only steal other people's spiritual beasts, kill them, and then refine them into puppets. Usually, the puppets that were successfully refined would be a rank higher than the spiritual beasts when they were alive. Killing other people's spiritual beasts, and even refining them into puppets to roam around, beast practitioners were definitely heretic practitioners that attracted the most hatred. There was no other. Earlier, Sesame suddenly appeared, and it was even at the 9th rank. That guard must have thought that they were stealing an 8th rank spiritual beast from a deity sect, and even refined it into a puppet, which was why they were being chased by the deity sect. She really had to thank Big Brother Guard for his imagination. He was too timely. Once they entered the city, the three of them tried to find out more information, but evil cultivators were not ordinary people. They were very cautious and would not tell anyone everything. After a whole day, the three of them finally found out the truth. The news that they waited for could be counted on one hand, and not many of them were reliable. Chunzi was also a beast cultivator. Regardless of whether it was an evil cultivator or a cultivator from an immortal sect, which one of them did not like to raise one or two spiritual beasts. Even her master had raised a group of silly immortal cranes. One could well imagine how much hatred a beast cultivator, who specialized in stealing people's spiritual beasts, would incite. It was to the extent that whenever they opened their mouths, they would be met with a few supercilious looks or glares. After a whole day, there was no progress. The three of them discussed. He planned to stay for a night. Chunzi had brought so many demonic beasts to attack Ancient Hill Sect. It could be seen that they were all his puppets. There were so many of them. Naturally, the person who lost his spirit beast was also in a similar situation. As long as he asked around, he would be able to find some useful information. The sky was already dark. The three of them found an inn, and after firmly rejecting the fatty Zidan's request to stay together, she returned to her own room. There were some things. She needed to sort it out. After setting up a barrier that blocked off probing in the room, she then called out the wood spirit from her divine sense. Wood spirit, do you know where the water spirit is? The 5 spirits each had their own connection, so it should be able to sense the existence of the water spirit. Chick, after the wood spirit woke up, it had already returned to its little potted plant form. Hearing her question, it tilted its head, and then, it waved its branches for a while. Chick, 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 chick. She did not understand a single word. Alright, there's no need to chick anymore. It seemed like communication was a huge problem. I'll ask, you answer. If it's right, you nod. If it's wrong, you shake your head. When you were in the Great Hall today, did you sense the water spirit from someone else's body? Currently, Xiaoyi was not injured, so naturally, Fengyi could not use the water spirit to treat his injuries. That water spirit should still be on Fengyi. Although they had no choice in this rescue operation, it was not certain that they would be able to obtain the water spirit. Chick, the wood spirit, tilted its head, and then, it began to shake violently, and even shook off a table of leaves. None. Not a single person in that group? Chick. It continued to shake off the leaves. Then where was the water spirit? Zhu Yao was dumbfounded as well. Wait a minute. Then did you sense the water spirit today? Chick nodded. She sensed the water spirit, yet it was not on the person in the Great Hall. Could it be? The second day, the sky had just brightened, and the little rescue squad began to work overtime. This time, the three of them went to the most bustling market in the city. This was the first time Zhu Yao had come to a practitioner's market in the cultivation world. Yet, she did not have the heart to stop and stroll around. She focused 120% of her attention and searched for Sovereign Feng Yi's whereabouts. In order to better blend in with the crowd, ever since they entered the city, they had concealed their nascent soul cultivation. After all, 3 nascent soul practitioners walking together, and even asking around, would easily attract suspicion. It would be different if they were 3 Azoth practitioners. After asking around, she found out that Chen Zi had basically never appeared in Yutzong City before. Or to be precise, he did not dare to appear here. She heard that 200 years ago, student Chen Zi courted death by stealing a 6th-grade spiritual beast that the city lord had painstakingly subdued, and even refined it into a puppet. Ever since then, he was wanted by the entire city, and he no longer dared to take a step into Yutzong City. Zhu Yao was a little discouraged. Yutzong City was Chen Zi's only shelter. If he did not even dare to come here, then where else would he dare to hide? That's not right. He dared to commit such a huge crime in Ancient Hills sect, and it was during the promotion ceremony, where the various clans and sects were present. Then, he must have a place that he felt was extremely safe to hide in. And the most dangerous place was usually the safest place. In other words, it was extremely possible that he had concealed his identity and was hiding in Yutzong City. When she thought of this point, Zhu Yao was instantly energized. She told her thoughts to the other two, and changed their target of search. They gave up on Chen Zi, and instead, searched for news about Sovereign Feng Yi. Although the information they obtained was not much, it was enough for them to confirm that Feng Yi had indeed come to Yutzong City before. There was even someone who said that he saw her and a man who was traveling together, heading towards the northwest direction. The 3 of them were overjoyed. Just as they were planning to head towards the northwest direction, suddenly, a commotion broke out on the streets, and the crowd suddenly began to congeal. A scream suddenly sounded in front of them, and the crowd squeezed towards them one after another. Zhu Yao and the 2 others still did not know what happened, when a few more screams sounded in front of them, and they could faintly see a few wisps of black smoke rising. Let's hurry and leave this place. Zidan immediately decided to leave. Zhu Yao and Xiaoyi nodded. They had snuck in the first place. If they were to be discovered, they would be in trouble. Just as the 3 of them turned around, they saw a heretic practitioner, who was selling spiritual beast eggs to them earlier, suddenly had his 2 eyes bulging out, and he let out a miserable scream. His eyes, ears, mouth and nose were constantly emitting out thick smoke that was as black as ink. His body was disintegrating at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in an instant, he had already turned into ashes. Not even his bones could be found. Such a terrifying method of killing. Forget about Zhu Yao. Even Reverend Zidan had never seen it before. However, this was not the end. The same screams continuously sounded in the surroundings, and in an instant, 5 to 6 robust male practitioners had died in the same way on the streets in front of everyone's eyes. Instantly, several terrified voices sounded out from the crowd, and heretic practitioners cherished their lives the most. The streets that were filled with people earlier were instantly filled with those who rode on artifacts, and those who summoned spiritual beasts, one after another, began to flee for their lives. Zhu Yao and the other 2 exchanged glances, and planned to leave as well. What's with the ruckus? Suddenly, a demigod stage pressure came from the sky, and the people who were fleeing in all directions earlier instantly quietened down. A few people who had already flown into the sky lost their balance and instantly fell down. There were even some foundation stage heretic practitioners who did not have high cultivation, who were instantly forced to bleed from the powerful pressure. An extremely beautiful woman, suddenly descended from the sky. She was dressed in a very revealing manner, with only a layer of translucent muslin covering her body. Her legs were bare, and the 2 round lumps on her chest were even more prominent. Her appearance was even more beautiful than Sovereign Feng Yi's. Zhu Yao could not help but sigh. This was definitely a stunner, that men would not be able to shift their eyes away from once they saw her. Strangely, none of the heretic practitioners present dared to raise their heads. Rather than saying they were respectful, it would be more accurate to say that they were afraid. The entire place was completely silent. What are you bunch of people shouting about so early in the morning for? Disturbing my sweet dreams. The woman glanced at the crowd on the streets. Hearing her question, a tall heretic practitioner at the side hurriedly replied, reporting to the city lord. Earlier, something strange happened in the city. So many people. The woman coldly snorted. With a wave of her hand, the heretic practitioner who replied was suddenly sent flying. He heavily smashed onto the ground a few meters away, and puked out a few mouthfuls of blood. The woman then waved her hand again, and that person once again flew back, kneeling in front of her. The woman's slender jade feet heavily stepped on that man's back. With one hand, she lifted the man's chin, narrowed her eyes, and said with a smile, "Why don't you understand the rules? What city lord? Call me queen." Zhu Yao gave a face. So this city lord was actually a queen. The man who replied was evidently heavily injured, yet he still gritted his teeth and replied, "Yes, your majesty." This lowly one did not understand the rules. "I hope that your majesty can forgive me." Zhu Yao gave a face. "Your majesty, did you cross over from an anime? Amen." Only then did the woman release his chin, turned around, and sat on the man's back. Casually pointing to another person at the side, she said, "Tell me, what's the big deal that happened?" "City, my majesty, there were quite a few people who were strolling around here earlier. They suddenly turned into ashes, and not even their bones remained. Before they disappeared, their bodies were even emitting out black smoke." Black smoke? The woman's expression sank, and suddenly, she revealed a cold smile. "So it's that traitor Chenzi. I didn't even go look for him, yet he actually dared to return. Everyone in the city, listen up." The queen stood up, and once again released her pressure. With a cold smile, she said, "Find me a beast practitioner called Chenzi, who is able to capture him. This queen will heavily reward you." The entire place once again went into an uproar. Everyone's faces were a little excited, looking as though they were itching to give it a try. There were even people who had already impatiently begun to move. Chapter 71. Zhu Yao tugged on Zidan, signaling him to escape amidst the chaos. "Reporting to my king, those 3 people earlier are looking for a beast practitioner called Chenzi as well." A mystic artifact peddler pointed straight at them. "The hell, big bro, what grudge do I have with you?" As expected, in the next moment, the pressure of a demigod directly pressed down on the 3 of them. Zhu Yao did not manage to stand properly, and was instantly pressed onto the ground. The other 2 were not any better either, as they half knelt on the ground, cold sweat dripping down. They were merely a large realm apart, but they did not expect the difference in strength to be so great. Forget about resisting, they could not even stand up. "Who are you people? Why are you looking for Chenzi?" In a flash, the woman was already standing in front of them. Her eyes swept across them like a blade, and suddenly laughed. "Ha ha ha, so you people are deity practitioners. I never expected that practitioners from a deity sect would actually send themselves to my doorstep." In front of a demigod, the 3's disguises were basically unable to withstand a single blow, and they instantly returned to their original forms. "Men, bring them back." Under the woman's command, a light smoke floated over, instantly turning into 3 men. Each of them wiped out their little rescue squad. Zhu Yao instantly felt like crying. That Chenzi, he must have destroyed Earth in his previous life. Why did he offend people everywhere? This was the first time Zhu Yao had entered a prison in her life. One of her cellmates was a fatty, while the other had a buff that caused trouble to his teammates. Outside, there was even a perverted queen who could sentence them to death at any time. "Little brother, do you have any way to escape?" The fatty cellmate squeezed over, and looked at her with a constipated expression. Initially, she did have one, if she had brought her master along with her. But the higher-ups of Ancient Hill sect did not give her this chance. No. Zhu Yao sighed, and pointed to the prison door. You saw it yourself. Earlier, that female heretic practitioner set up a restriction on the door. The moment it is touched, it will explode. Even if we forcefully charge out, it will alarm that heretic practitioner. What if we use your 9th-ranked demonic beast to swallow that door? This way, even if it explodes, there would not be any sound. Zhu Yao continued to shake her head. That demonic beast of mine is too big. Such a small prison cell is basically unable to contain it. Secondly, she had another consideration. Xiao Yi had seen sesame on the door of Taisioluk's secret realm. Though back then, it was sealed on the door. She looked a little different from her current appearance, but it was hard to guarantee that he would recognize her after seeing her a few more times. Even so, let's just wait and see. Zidan had initially thought that even if the three of them were unable to find Sovereign Feng Yi, they would still be able to deal with the heretic practitioners in this city. However, he didn't expect the city lord to have already broken through to the soul formation stage. Senior Marshal Brother Zidan, looking at you, you seem to know that heretic practitioner earlier. Xiao Yi suddenly asked. Zidan sighed, nodded, and began to explain the whole story. Zhu Yao curiously listened as well. The more she listened, the more she felt that this was simply a melodramatic drama. That city lord was called Rue Yu, and was actually Chen Zi's senior and junior brother. He was originally a disciple of the Lily Immortal sect, and his sect was proficient in dual cultivation. However, for some unknown reason, that sect was annihilated. Only the two of them were left. Therefore, after all kinds of scenes of mutual dependence, Chen Zi joined the demon sect, and became an evil cultivator. Chen Zi became a beast cultivator, but Rue Yu was still a proper immortal cultivator. Due to the pig teammate Chen Zai, various people came knocking on her door to seek revenge. Later on, she even fell in love with someone who did not like her. After being rejected by the other party, in a fit of anger, she went astray. And she went astray in a very unique way. She did not turn into any kind of heretic practitioner. Instead, she modified her own sect's dual cultivation technique. She turned into a heretic art that specialized in absorbing men's vital essence, and used the other party's vital essence to raise her cultivation. You guessed correctly, the specific method of operation was to tightly unite with the bed as the center. With two or more men as the foundation, it was a harmonious movement that could not be described from the neck down. From then on, Rue Yu became a heretic practitioner, and she caught up from behind, and her cultivation actually surpassed Chen Zi. The two people who shared the same fate once again approached each other. However, Chen Zi had his eyes on Sovereign Feng Yi of the deity sect. In order to meet Feng Yi, he even thought of ways to enter the deity sect and seek death a few times. Hence, the two martial siblings had completely torn each other apart. Speaking of which, Zhu Yao suddenly recalled the strange phenomenon on the streets earlier. Those black smokes were exactly the same as the ones she saw in Ancient Hill sect. It could be seen that those few dead heretic practitioners were done by Chen Zi, and that Rue Yu did not even think about it, and immediately gave the order to capture Chen Zi, because she was extremely familiar with his mystic arts. However, he had clearly already hidden himself, so why did he still take the risk to come out and kill people? Wasn't he afraid of exposing himself? Zhu Yao's heart was filled with a bunch of questions, but what was worth confirming was, Chen Zi was indeed in Yutsong City. Hurry up, come out. Just as she was pondering, the guard walked over and opened the prison door. Zhu Yao and the other two people's mystic arts were sealed, and after many twists and turns, they were brought to a half-closed door. The three of them were forcefully pushed inside, and then the door was closed. Zhu Yao finally stabilized her figure with great difficulty, and did not roll into a ball with the two of them. This was a very big, yet very spacious room. White or red light muslin was hung everywhere, and the air was filled with a fishy stench, causing people to feel extremely disgusted. Just why did those guards bring them here? There seems to be someone over there. Xiao Yi pointed to the front. After hesitating for a moment, The guards would not push them in for no reason. Only then did the three of them cautiously walk in. This room was ridiculously big. After walking for a few dozen meters, they could faintly see a human figure moving behind the light muslin in front of them. That fishy stench, however, grew even stronger, and low moans of either joy or pain instantly sounded next to the three people's ears. When they realized what those sounds were, the three people's faces darkened. Big Brother guards sure have a heavy taste. What's the meaning of inviting them to look at a live pornography? Can they get a refund? Zhu Yao turned around, and just as she was about to leave, she was suddenly pulled by an extremely strong suction force and flew in the opposite direction. In an instant their blood churned, and the three people, who were completely unable to cast any mystic arts to resist, puked out a mouthful of blood. With a kneeling posture, they stopped in front of an extremely large and luxurious bed. And on the bed, the woman who was currently swaying her indescribable body parts with all her might, was currently using an indescribable method with another indescribable man. In the midst of indescribable sounds, even more so, drilled into the three people's ears. Needless to say, that bold and unrestrained woman was Ruiyu. After she cast her mystic arts in front of the bed, she no longer cared about them, and focused on the indescribable man on the bed. Only after Zhu Yao took a closer look, did she realize that there was actually not just one man on the bed, but four. Every single one of them was looking at Ruiyu with an infatuated expression. And the four of them had a very clear division of labor. Each of them was responsible for an indescribable part on Ruiyu's body. This scene was so alluring that even Zhu Yao, who had watched VHS movies in the modern era, was dumbfounded. It was no wonder she wanted others to call her queen. If she were to bring out a whip and candles, she would definitely be a queen. The person on the bed was performing very attentively, and the audience below were also vomiting blood very attentively as well. Mama's egg, even if they did not sell tickets, there was no need for them to constantly release pressure to suppress them, right? And they were even loosening and tightening at times, creating manual 3D special effects. 2 hours later, a certain VHS movie queen's performance, which included acting, sound effects, and 3D special effects, finally came to an end. And the four men on the bed, who were initially robust and handsome, were visibly thinning out at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye, as though they only had a single breath left. Ruiyu kicked away the man who was still holding onto her round buttocks, picked up a light muslin at the side of the bed, and stood up. Taking advantage of the situation, she slid out the indescribable part of the man below her. The three of you, just because you're nascent soul practitioners, you dare to enter my Yutsong city. Are all the people in the deity sect as stupid as you three? Ruiyu's voice carried a hint of laziness. Putting on the light muslin, she walked over barefooted. Stopping in front of Zhu Yao, she bent down and pinched her chin, and said with a smile, "Aren't you pretty?" The hell! She had been watching the show for too long earlier, and had forgotten that she was currently a man as well. Ruiyu smiled, and then, her eyes instantly turned cold. She forcefully slapped Zhu Yao's face. This queen hates good-looking men the most. This pervert. Not only did she have a problem with her morals, her life was in danger as well. This slap, which clearly carried spiritual energy, had instantly slapped Zhu Yao's face askew. Her chin was instantly dislocated, and it was so painful that tears even began to flow out. If you don't like good-looking men, then say so earlier. Why did she have to vent her anger on her face? She was bullying her for not being born from a mother. Ruiyu vented her anger, and then walked towards Xiao Yi at the side. Similarly, she raised his head, and her smile became even colder. "You're not bad either." Raising her hand, and just as her slap was about to land on his face. "Have you always used ruthlessness to disguise yourself?" "What did you say?" Ruiyu's slap unexpectedly stopped next to Xiao Yi's ears. Xiao Yi sighed, however. He looked at her with a pitiful gaze. "Isn't that so? Hating men is just a deliberate disguise of yours." "Disguise? This is a disguise as well?" Ruiyu coldly laughed. Turning around, with a wave of her hand, the four lifeless and skinny men on the bed instantly turned into ashes. Her expression grew even colder, as she ruthlessly stared at Xiao Yi. Good-looking men, all deserve to die. Xiao Yi, however, let out an even deeper sigh, and looked at her even more pitifully. You're simply hurt very deeply. Slaughter is not your true nature. Ruiyu was speechless, as though she was shocked by his words. For a moment, she did not know how to react. Her hands clenched and then loosened. After repeating this a few times, she finally let out a heavy cold laugh. Ruiyu turned around and sat back on the bed, staring straight at Xiao Yi. You're a little interesting as a man. The situation changed too quickly, and Zhu Yao was a little unable to keep up with it. It was as though she could faintly hear a voice resounding next to her ears. Conquering Ruiyu is a success. Xiao Yi has obtained a girl X1. The hell, this works too. Stud Halo blinds the world. I do want to hear, what is my true nature? Guards. The guard at the door pushed open the door and walked in. Bring those two people back to the prison. Without saying a word, the guard picked up the two light bulbs, Zhu Yao and Zidan. Zidan thought that the queen was going to harm Xiao Yi, and wanted to resist. Zhu Yao silently gave him a "it's okay" expression, and the two of them were thrown back into the prison by the guard. Chapter 72. Zhu Yao had never been so thankful for Xiao Yi's protagonist Halo. Looking at the queen's reaction earlier, there was no longer any problem with his life, and he might even be able to help his teammates. To be able to fool even a demigod stage female practitioner, as expected, Xiao Yi was using his life to pick up girls. The world was changing too quickly. She really wanted to chew on a packet of spicy gluten to calm down. If only her lower jaw was fine. In the next 2 days, Zhu Yao and Zidan's lives were especially peaceful. No more guards brought them out to watch the live version of VHS movies. It was actually very painful, but her lower jaw was successfully reattached. Just when they thought they were about to be forgotten by the queen made a high-profile appearance. This time, she did not wear those see-through light muslin, but ordinary clothes. Although it was still very flirtatious, at least she wore shoes. The queen coldly looked at the two people in the prison, and lazily said, "Initially, I wanted to kill you two to avoid being an eyesore, but he said you two are his senior martial brothers. Although I hate senior martial brothers the most, I promised him to let you two go. So I'll give you two a chance to live." Ruiyu waved her hand, and the restriction on the door was removed. "Why aren't you coming out?" Seeing them walk out, Ruiyu cast an art, and the sealed mystic energy instantly began to circulate again. Zhu Yao's first reaction was to cast a recovery mystic art on her lower jaw, to ease the pain from the forced reattachment of her lower jaw. Ruiyu cast a disdainful look at her action. A grown man was actually afraid of such a small pain. Zhu Yao curled her lips without minding it. She had experienced even more painful things, but she could not endure the pain for 2 days. "Let's go, he wants to see you too." Ruiyu once again glared at her, turned around and walked out. Among the three, only Zidan still had a blank look. Zhu Yao, however, knew that the person they wanted to see was definitely Xiao Yi. They arrived at a garden, and Xiao Yi was standing by the side of a pond with his immaculate clothes. Senior martial brothers. Xiao Yi walked over. Ruiyu, however, welcomed him, and immediately held onto Xiao Yi's hand, as she looked at the two people in front of her provocatively. "Junior martial brother Xiao. You're..." Zidan frowned, and looked at the two people back and forth. His expression was filled with disapproval. Could it be that junior martial brother Xiao was going to associate with heretic practitioners? A hint of uneasiness flashed past Xiao Yi's face, as he explained the course of events to the two of them. However, the content of the story was how pitiful Ruiyu's life was. She had no choice but to become an evil cultivator. After his advice, she had repented. He hoped that everyone could put down their prejudices and forgive her. Zhu Yao was shocked. So he wasn't acting earlier. The words that Xiao Yi said in that room were all from the bottom of his heart. It was not a sudden impulse, or a sudden inspiration. In other words, he truly pitied this evil cultivator, who specialized in sucking men's essence from the bottom of his heart. Zidan was dumbstruck as well, and when he finished listening, his face had already turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. Although Zidan was an optimistic fatty, who usually did not have a temper, and was easy to talk to, he was, after all, a mountain lord, and the core strength of ancient hill sect. They grew up under the red flag, and took root in the immortal sect. When Xiaoyi said this, he was definitely going to betray the immortal sect. Zidan's complexion turned from black to purple, and on his chubby hands, even the veins were about to pop out. Just as he was about to charge forward and fight, Zhu Yao grabbed onto him. "Senior Marshal brother, don't forget the reason why we're here." Zidan glanced at her, and only then did he suppress the raging storm in his eyes. Turning his head, he no longer looked at Xiaoyi. Seeing that the two of them did not resist, Ruiyu coldly snorted. At least you two know your place." The veins on Zidan's hands once again popped out. Zhu Yao, however, had long gotten used to it. Ever since Xiaoyi was 10, she knew that there was a problem with this child's worldview. However, when he said such words, she was indeed a little shocked as well. No matter how pitiful Ruiyu's life was, no matter how forced she was, it was a fact that she used men's essence to cultivate. Now that she had risen to a demigod, who knew how many white bones had been accumulated behind her, how could a single, "I had no choice" negate it? Her life was pitiful, but in this world, there were as many pitiful lives as the hairs on a cow. If everyone was like her, then what would this world become? There was a good saying, life was given by the heavens, but the road was walked by oneself. Some people lived in heaven, yet they could walk the devil's path. Some people lived in hell, yet they could still live the splendor of heaven. The decision had always been in one's own hands, and all of the involuntary actions were actually excuses to fall into depravity. "We'll discuss this matter in the future," Zhu Yao said. "Have you found a way to save your master?" She did not care about picking up girls, as long as he still remembered his own master. Xiaoyi was startled for a moment, and only then did he realize that he had actually placed Ruiyu's matter in the first place, and had forgotten about his own master. A hint of guilt surfaced on his face, before he replied, "Yutsong City's territory is too vast. I'm afraid, regarding the search, we have to think about it at length." "There's no need to think about it at length." Zhu Yao waved her hand. "We don't have that much time. I have a method that we can try." There were too many people in Yutsong City. She did not know how long it would take for them to investigate one by one, and since Chen Zi dared to enter, he definitely had a way to not be discovered. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so fearless as to kill people in the city. Zhu Yao's method was very simple. Although the number of people could not be too few, it would be fine if she just sent people out. Of course, not everyone could leave the city, but all heretic practitioners with wood spirit veins. Feng Yi possessed the wood attribute heavenly spirit vein, so her body would definitely be filled with wood spiritual energy. Under the situation where there were no wood spirit veins in the entire city, she would have the wood spirit sense where the wood spiritual energy was the densest, and Feng Yi would be there. Of course, she could not tell them that she possessed the wood spirit, so the person who would sense it would be her, who possessed the wood attribute heavenly spirit vein as well. This was also the best method she could think of in these 2 days. When Zhu Yao finished speaking, Xiaoyi and Ziling felt that this method was feasible as well. Although Ruiyu was a little unwilling, looking at Xiaoyi's face, she still issued a city lord's order, ordering all the people in the city who possessed the wood attribute spirit vein to leave the city, and they were not allowed to enter for the next 3 days. In just a morning, there was not a single heretic practitioner with the wood spirit vein left in Yutsong City. Zhu Yao sat in a lotus position and looked as though she was sensing the wood spiritual energy, but in reality, she was probing deep into her divine sense. Would spirit sense it again? How many places in the city have wood spiritual energy? Chick, the wood spirit tilted its head, pondered for a moment, and then, obediently stretched out a vine. Chick. This was the transportation method they had agreed on earlier. 1 vine meant 1. Very good. Now tell me, which direction is it in? Chick. The vine quickly turned into an arrow and pointed towards the left direction. That was the west. Good job. Zhu Yao praised it. Only then did she open her eyes and inform her teammates who were waiting for news. It's in the west. Xiao Yi and Ziling exchanged glances. One summoned his spiritual artifact, while the other summoned his spiritual beast, and walked out of the door. Naturally, Zhu Yao followed them as well, and flew towards the west of the city. Zhu Yao communicated with the wood spirit while pointing the way. As he pointed the way, they soon arrived at a dilapidated house. This place should be the most secluded place in the city, as there was not a single person in the surroundings. It was an ordinary house with 2 rooms, and it was completely empty inside. This is the place you sensed. Ruiyu had unknowingly followed over, and looked at her with a cold smile. Xiaoyi frowned. Why did you follow me here? Ruiyu glanced at him coquettishly. Because I was worried about you. Xiaoyi did not reply. Looking at his expression, he seemed to be enjoying it a little. Zhu Yao silently rolled her eyes. Pulling Ziling, who was about to explode, she took a step back. After all, Xiaoyi had saved them. No matter how he did not reject anyone, it was not their turn to speak. I have indeed sensed a very dense wood spiritual energy in this direction. The little wood spirit basically did not develop any deceptive abilities, so naturally, it would not be wrong for it to point in this direction. Ziling scratched his head, and was a little anxious. Little brother. Everything could be seen at a glance, not to mention the inside of the house. Not to mention the inside of this house. There isn't a single person in the surrounding few kilometers. Zhu Yao once again entered the house to take a look. Immediately after, she went to the other house to take a look. Don't you guys feel that? Zhu Yao pointed to this house. There's a little problem with the structure of these 2 houses. Each of the 2 houses was not even 15 square meters, however, the area occupied by this house was close to 40 square meters. Excluding the public stalls, at least 5 square meters of space was missing. You're saying? Ziling's eyes shone. Exchanging glances with Xiao Yi, they reacted at the same time. Together, they flew to the roof, and lifted a large piece of roof tile in the middle. Both of their faces were filled with joy at the same time. There's another room in the middle. Ruiyu retracted her mocking and ridiculing expression as well. With a wave of her hand, she summoned a huge gust of wind, and instantly lifted the entire roof. Together with the 2 people on the roof, they jumped into the room in the middle that did not have a door. Zhu Yao flew in as well. Little brother, you're really something, to actually be able to discover something like this. Ziling patted on her shoulders and praised. Zhu Yao jolted from the pat of his big fat paw, and immediately stood a little further away. Could she say that she had seen this through her experience of looking at houses in the modern era? It was not easy to buy a house in the modern era, and there were even black-hearted developers who would frequently cut down on the size of the house. She had all of this through training. What's the use of discovering a dark room? Ruiyu continued to use her mocking technique. Isn't it still empty? Zhu Yao sized up her surroundings. Indeed, this was still an empty room, compared to the dilapidated room outside. Other than being filled with dust, this room was not even dilapidated. It was as though no one had entered it before. She walked 1 round around the corner of the room, and did not discover anything. However, she faintly felt that the floor was a little slippery. Sweeping away the dust to take a look, she saw that the floor was actually paved with stone slabs, and there were even some carvings on it. There's something on the floor. When Ruiyu heard that, she immediately formed hand seals with both of her hands, and released a large area of wind-type mystic energy. In an instant, the surrounding winds blew violently, and the walls were instantly blown away as well. When it stopped, the perfectly good 3-room house only had a piece of floorboard left. What kind of grudge do you have with houses? Have you ever considered the feelings of someone who would not be able to earn a single set in his entire life? What's this carving? Xiaoyi asked. The moment the dust was blown away, the things carved on the floor were revealed. There were a total of 9 carvings, and they were arranged neatly. The patterns on them were all different. They were not any kind of symbols or imprints, nor were they formations. Furthermore, they had never been seen before. Ruiyu, Zidan, and Xiaoyi stared at them for a moment. Yet, not a single one of them could see what was carved on the floor. Chapter 73. Little brother, have you seen these diagrams before? Zidan asked. Zhu Yao shook her head. These carvings were all over the place. It would be strange if she could recognize them. There seems to be a piece missing here. Xiaoyi walked to the right side of the 9 diagrams, and as expected, there was a concave area, as though it was dug out by someone. Xiaoyi reached out his hand to touch it, and suddenly, the empty space emitted out a silver light. It's actually glowing here. The 3 of them were dumbfounded. Zhu Yao looked at the glowing square empty space, and then, she suddenly turned her head to look at the other 9 diagrams at the side. Something that was cut off in her mind suddenly connected with a ding. The hell, this was actually a puzzle. No wonder she felt that the diagram was all over the place. It was actually messed up. Make way. Zhu Yao pushed Xiao Yi, who was next to the empty space. This should be a game mechanism. Zhu Yao almost said that it was a game. She squatted down, pressed on the piece next to the empty space and pulled it out. Without using much strength, that diagram automatically moved towards the empty space, and the place where the diagram was originally, once again lit up with a silver-white light. Zhu Yao looked at the other 8 stone slabs, and then began to focus on the puzzle. In less than 10 minutes, a complete diagram was completed. Zhu Yao moved the last piece of the puzzle to its original position, and the light on the empty space finally stopped lighting up. However, the ground began to shake, and the complete puzzle suddenly emitted out a red, formation-like radiance. And there were even characters that she did not recognize floating on it. It's done. Zidan looked at Zhu Yao with a surprised look. Little brother, I never expected that you're actually proficient in mechanisms and formations from the ancient era. This retarded game, and you call it the ancient era? Zhu Yao replied with a smile. Ho ho, I know a little. Could she say that she had been playing this since she was 3 years old? This is a teleportation formation. Xiaoyi took a step forward in shock. Master must be on the other side of the formation. After saying that, he was the first to walk in. Ruiyu pouted. A hint of dissatisfaction surfaced on her face, yet she still followed him in. Zidan nodded towards Zhu Yao, and then walked towards the center of the formation. The red light instantly brightened, and the scenery in front of them was completely covered by the red light. A moment later, it slowly dimmed down. Looking around, they had already arrived at an unfamiliar place. It was dark all around, and they could faintly see the broken rocks and broken walls in front of them. It was lonely and quiet all around, so quiet that it was a little strange. Zhu Yao summoned a wisp of flame. The surroundings instantly became clear. There was a city in front of them, but it was a deserted city of the dead. Looking at the style of the house, it should be very old. Moreover, there were all sorts of strange runes engraved on the walls, somewhat similar to the characters on the walls of Yutsong. Could this be the underground city? Ruiyu mumbled. So there really is an underground city in Yutsong City. Hearing this, the other 3 were stunned. The underground city was actually a legend. According to legend, Yutsong City was the location of an ancient immortal cultivation sect. The sect was proficient in ancient secret arts, especially formations. Later on, the sect declined. At the moment of annihilation, the surviving disciples worked together to bury a portion of the sect into the ground to avoid being hunted down by their enemies. But after so many years, many people had dug deep into Yutsong City, but no one had found this city. After a long time, they all thought that this legend was a lie. This legend, Zidan had mentioned it to Zhu Yao as well. Thinking about it, it was understandable. How could a city hidden by an immortal cultivation sect that was famous for its secret arts and formations be found so easily? However, the entrance to the underground city was actually a jigsaw puzzle. This was too casual, wasn't it? Zhu Yao gave a face. Little brother, can you sense the direction of the wood spiritual energy? Zidan asked. Zhu Yao closed her eyes. A moment later, she opened them and shook her head. The little wood spirit had waited for too long. It actually fell asleep. This was too unreliable. There's that black smoke here as well. Xiao Yi's expression suddenly turned cold. He pointed to the wisp of black smoke not far in front of them. It seems like that evil thief is indeed hiding here. Zidan shook the fats on his body. Let's search for the source of the black smoke. Zhu Yao increased her speed and chased after the crowd. The black smoke was getting thicker as well. She could even faintly smell an unpleasant stench, as though it was some sort of rotting problem. The few of them walked further and further away from the underground city, arriving at a passageway. The road was getting narrower as well. A few minutes later, the black smoke in front of them was so thick that they could no longer see the direction. Practitioners had strong senses in the first place, so Zhu Yao could not help but feel disgusted. She hurriedly sealed off a portion of her sense of smell, and only then did she feel a little better. "Little brother, be careful." Zhu Yao was currently walking forward numbly, when suddenly, she was pulled 2 steps back by Zidan. When she took a closer look, it was actually a gigantic pit in front of her. The size of the pit was simply more than 4 to 5 football fields. And within the pit, black smoke was endlessly emitting out, and below the thick smoke was a pool of black water. It was bubbling like lava from a volcano, and there were even blood clots of various sizes floating in the water. When she took a closer look, they were actually all rotting, or half-rotting demonic beast corpses. Zhu Yao was so frightened that she took 2 steps back. Fortunately, Zidan pulled her back. Patting on her chest, she calmed herself down, and just happened to see Rueyu's cold smile. Zhu Yao's heart turned cold. Earlier, the one who was walking in front of her was coincidentally Rueyu. Yet, the one who pulled her back was Zidan. She clearly knew there was a pit here, yet, she did not warn her. She did it on purpose. This queen was up to no good. This must be a place to refine demonic beast puppets. Zidan analyzed. Turning around, he brought the crowd into a small path. Chunzi isn't here. It seems like we can only split up and search. The 4 of them discussed, and decided to split into 2 groups and search separately. Xiao Yi and Rueyu would return to the underground city to search, while Zhu Yao and Zidan would continue to head deeper into the cave. Zhu Yao had no choice but to walk towards this narrow path. The path was still filled with black smoke, so Zhu Yao had no choice but to release her divine sense and carefully explore the path. The strange thing was this path was unexpectedly long. Even with her nascent soul stage divine sense, she was not able to explore to the end, and the deeper she went the darker it became. Zhu Yao held onto a ball of fire and walked for 2 hours in the path, yet she still could not see the end. Finally, she realized something was wrong and pulled the person in front of her. "Senior Martial Brother, do you feel that we've been going in circles?" Zidan was startled. "But earlier, I intentionally left a strand of spiritual energy at the places we walked past. I didn't sense any similar spiritual energy ripples." Although Zidan was fat, he was never muddle-headed when it came to official matters. However, Zhu Yao was muddle-headed. This was already the 3rd time she stepped on a piece of slippery rock, and she had almost sprained her ankle. And every time she sprained her ankle, the feeling was the same. She could guarantee with her integrity that it was definitely the same piece. "Senior Martial Brother, try releasing a little more spiritual energy." It was not a solution to continue walking like this. Zidan nodded and released a strand of spiritual energy as he was told. The 2 of them did not continue to move and simply stood on the spot. A few minutes later, Zidan's eyes suddenly widened. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face. "The spiritual energy is gone." That strand of spiritual energy actually disappeared without a trace. The spiritual energy mark released by a mighty nascent soul stage practitioner actually disappeared so strangely. As expected, they were walking in circles on the spot. Zhu Yao enlarged the fireball in her hand a little, causing her surroundings to become even clearer. The first thing she did was to kick away the rock beneath her feet. She then carefully inspected this strange path. "There's a rune engraved on it." Zidan pointed to the stone wall on the right side of the path. Zhu Yao took a closer look, and it was once again those strange words on the city walls. She was completely unable to understand them. Zhu Yao reached out her hand to wipe away some of the dust, wanting to take a closer look. That rune suddenly let out a flash of light, and she instantly felt her hand turning numb. As though she had been electrocuted. The fireball on her other hand, which was used to illuminate the path, instantly extinguished as well. "This stone wall can absorb spiritual energy." Zhu Yao immediately retracted her hand. Zidan cast a clear wind art, and immediately headed towards the entire path. The path which was filled with dust earlier was instantly blown clean. On the stone walls on both sides, the same type of rune was actually engraved densely. It seems as long as one uses mystic arts and comes into contact with the rune, their spiritual energy will be sucked away. Zidan pointed to the front and said, "Let's walk again. Let's see if there's anything strange." Zhu Yao nodded. Being trapped here forever was not a solution either. She still had to find a way out. As expected, after the two of them walked for a short while, they realized an anomaly. The paths were all built with identical rectangular yellowish-brown rocks, but the one on the stone wall in front of them was a cube, and it was even blue, making it especially eye-catching. Wasn't this clearly telling others that the exit was here? For a moment, Zhu Yao was a little worried for the intelligence of the person who built the path. She couldn't be colorblind, right? Zidan pressed on that blue rock and circulated his spiritual energy. As expected, it was not absorbed. The blue rock suddenly trembled a few times, and the runes on the surrounding yellowish-brown rocks instantly began to move, as though they were alive. They formed the pattern of a formation on the entire wall, and they emitted out a red glow. So there's another path here. Zidan glanced at Zhu Yao. "Little brother, you're more familiar with formations. Why don't you walk in front?" Zhu Yao gave a helpless look. "How did you see that I'm familiar with it?" However, walking in front was good as well. With such a huge lump of him walking in front, it would really block her line of sight. Hence, without any objections, she immediately passed through the formation wall. Behind the formation was yet another path, and it was of the same type as before. Zhu Yao instantly felt very tired. Why did she feel as though she was walking in a maze? Summoning a fireball to illuminate the path, Zhu Yao released her divine sense to its fullest. Resigned to her fate, she continued to explore the path, especially splitting her attention to observe the differences in the surrounding walls. However, she no longer found those square-shaped rocks. The only change was, the path became narrower the further she walked. Walking towards the end, even she had to lower her head as she walked, let alone Zidan, whose body was growing horizontally. He was about to curl himself up into a ball. An hour later, she finally reached the end. It was a wall, and 3 patterns were carved on it. One was in the shape of a phoenix, one was in the shape of a dragon, and the last one was in the shape of a tortoise. The positions of these 3 patterns were very loose, as though they were randomly carved on it. "Little brother, what kind of mechanism formation is this?" Zidan curiously asked. "I don't know either. There were only 3 patterns, so how would she know which game it was?" There's a stone box here." Zhu Yao turned around to take a look, and as expected, there was a rectangular stone box beneath her feet. Sweeping it with her divine sense, she did not find any traces of a formation. When she opened it, she saw that the entire box was filled with carvings that looked like small tiles. Their sizes and appearances were the same as the ones on the stone wall. However, there was an additional tiger-shaped one. The line in Zhu Yao's mind once again connected with the ding sound. "If I call you Gomoku, do you dare to accept?" Chapter 74. The person who designed this mechanism must be a primary school student. "Do you dare to make a combo at the back? Brother, do you have a clue?" Zhu Yao nodded, feeling like crying. She did not want to play this kind of retarded game at all. "All right." He let out a long sigh, resigned to his fate, and pasted the tiles on the wall one by one. Actually, it wasn't right to call it Gomoku, because it was a single-player game that was even less intelligent than Gomoku. The rules were very simple. There were 9 squares and 4 types of pictures. As long as the 4 pictures were looked at horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, it would be fine. As for the intelligence requirement, elementary school level, Zhu Yao spent 10 seconds to complete it. With a tired heart, she looked at the red light that once again lit up on the wall. This time, it was not a teleportation array formation. The entire wall seemed to have broken down into many small cubes, which then parted to the sides, directly revealing the path behind. "Let's hurry over." Zhu Yao was the first to make her way over. After taking 2 steps, she realized that there was no movement behind her. When she turned around, She realized that a gigantic meatball was currently stuck on the wall, and it was currently trying its best to squeeze its entire body of fat towards her like squeezing toothpaste. Zhu Yao. Ho ho little brother, I'm stuck again. Zidan looked at her apologetically, and desperately tried to squeeze in. What a tiring fatty. Zhu Yao stepped forward to help pull him out, only to realize that she was basically unable to move him at all. You don't need to use teleportation to enter? Zhu Yao suggested. Zidan nodded. With a single hand, she formed a hand seal. After a while, she shook her head. This won't do. This wall can absorb spiritual energy. Right now I'm stuck here. Before the hand seal can form, my spiritual energy will disperse first. Damn it, this passage was actually racist. Fatty wasn't human. Little brother, you should go in first. I think the end of this passage should be right in front. Zidan said. Go ahead by yourself, and see if the sovereign is there. If he's not here, you can come back to help me. Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment, before accepting his suggestion. Though he was stuck here, and did not have the strength to resist, however, this passage could only absorb spiritual energy, so it was unable to unleash any spells that were too powerful. Zirua was a nascent soul paragon cultivator. Normal attacks wouldn't be able to hurt him. Zhu Yao continued to walk towards the end alone. Zidan was right, the end of this passageway was right in front. Her divine sense had already detected that there was no way forward. In less than the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, she arrived at the end. This was another empty room. It was so clean that there were no furnishings in it. Not even a speck of dust could be seen. Zhu Yao was a little disappointed. She had been tossing and turning for half a day, yet there was nothing at all. In an instant, he felt as though he had been played. He let out a long sigh. Just as he was about to turn around to save Fatty, the ground cracked open, and a hole several meters long appeared. Zhu Yao's reaction was extremely fast, as she flew on her flying sword. Before she could heave a sigh of relief, suddenly, there was a huge suction force, and she was still sucked down. Fuck, you can't do that. Zhu Yao descended the entire time. Not long after, with a splat he fell flat on his back. My old waist. You don't need to waste your efforts. I will definitely not agree to it. A voice as cold as a lotus entered his ears. Phony. Mommy, I finally found this high mountain flower. The woman who was meditating in the middle opened her eyes. A trace of astonishment flashed across her cold face. You're courting death. Zhu Yao rubbed her aching waist. My name is Jiang Yu. The sect leader told me to call you home for dinner. Apui. He told me to save you. She was used to saying it. You're the new elder of Beast Taming Mountain. Fengyi asked. Zhu Yao nodded, and hurriedly expressed her gratitude. You're just wasting your efforts by coming here. Fengyi evidently did not know what to say. Forget about being grateful. She did not even look over. She really hated this pair of master and disciple. What should she do? Since I was able to find this place, how is it wasting my efforts? Speak clearly, hey. If I knew you didn't want to be saved, I definitely wouldn't have come. I say you. Sovereign, let's pack up and hurry and leave. Fatty was still stuck there. Fengyi frowned, as though she was dissatisfied with her casual tone. Do you think it's that easy to enter and exit this place? She coldly glanced at him. Putting aside the fact that this path is filled with mechanisms and formations, if one isn't skilled in this field, it would be hard to move even an inch. Mechanisms and formations? Was she talking about those puzzles and Gamoka games? Don't look down on her intelligence, hey. After all, she graduated from university. Not to mention that the surrounding talismans can absorb spiritual energy. They basically can't attack. Furthermore, Fengyi's prideful gaze swept past her, and then, she looked at the position behind her. Even the ancient formation on the door is complicated, and it's impossible to penetrate. Zhu Yao turned to look at the so-called ancient formation, and the corner of her lips twitched. Fengyi once again closed her eyes, as though she was mocking her for overestimating herself. Every time Chenzi enters, that formation will change. I have used the 5 elemental soldier arts and the essentials of formations, yet, I'm still unable to penetrate it. Unless you know the ancient secret art, you basically can't leave. Zhu Yao sighed. I really do know it. What? Feng Yi fiercely opened her eyes. Zhu Yao stared at the door in front of her with a helpless expression, and suddenly had the urge to scratch the door. Who doesn't know the 9-square grid? Formations with single-digit addition and subtraction. I'll spray salty soda on your face. You really know how to solve this ancient art. The tall mountain flower was finally willing to look her in the eye, though her expression was still filled with doubt. Zhu Yao rarely bothered with her. Walking to the front of the 9-square grid, she began to research the answer. The 9-square grid could be considered as a relatively simple number game. In the 9-square grid, one could fill in the numbers from 1 to 9. As long as the 3 numbers on the vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines add up to 15, it would be considered complete. Usually 3 or so numbers would be filled in the grid as a hint. As a game planner, she would often design these kinds of small games in her games to act as checkpoints. Hence, in front of her, a mere 9-square grid did not pose any pressure at all. She seemed to know what the answer was the moment she glanced at it. Zhu Yao circulated her spiritual energy and wrote the missing numbers on it. Feng Yi walked over as well. Looking at her serious look, she really believed that she knew how to open this door. When Zhu Yao finished writing the last number, the door did not have any reaction at all. Strange, why wasn't it moving? Could it be that she had to push it? She had no choice but to push the door again, but it still did not budge. Ugh, how embarrassing. That's not right, the answer isn't wrong. Zhu Yao did not understand either. Feng Yi sighed and shook her head. The expression she was looking at her with became even more indifferent. Evidently, she was regretting that she actually believed in him. Turning around, she planned to sit back down. Zhu Yao carefully stared at the words on the door again, and finally realized what was wrong. These words, why are they written so strangely? Zhu Yao touched the words and muttered. The words she wrote were completely different from the 3 words that were originally left on the grid. Could it be that this 9-square grid was able to recognize handwriting? It was so high-end. Those are runes. Feng Yi coldly replied. Runes that contain mystical energy are required to create runes when creating talismans. He did not even know about runes, and he even said that he could break this ancient art. Zhu Yao's eyes shone. In other words, he was not recognizing handwriting but the words. Say so earlier. She changed the words, that's not right. She seemed to have never learned how to create talismans. Venerable one, could you please change the numbers I wrote into runes? Only when it was time to use them would one regret not having enough knowledge. Feng Yi frowned. She really did not want to bother with this arrogant junior. If not for the fact that he was here to save her, and that this place only allowed entry and not exits, she would have long chased this unreasonable person out of here. Feng Yi waved her hand, and a gust of wind swept past. The few Chinese characters that Zhu Yao wrote earlier slowly twisted and changed. Although they were still the original numbers, they had an additional feeling of elegance. Seemingly after the final number changed, the entire door let out a kacha sound. The 4 sides of the door shone with a white light, and then, the door rumbled as it opened to the 2 sides. Zhu Yao was speechless. As expected, it was a 9-square grid that could be done even with her eyes closed. Feng Yi looked at the youth who was a little dazed. Zhu Yao was already used to this kind of shock. Actually, it was not because these mechanisms were difficult, nor was it because they did not know how to solve these mechanisms. Rather, they were used to relying on formations and talisman arts, and had thought of simple matters as too complicated. Let's go. Zhu Yao waved to the back. It's best if we leave as soon as possible. It won't be good if we're discovered. Feng Yi slowly stood up and looked at her with an indecipherable expression. However, she still followed after them. Maybe he was just lucky. There were simply too many ancient secret arts in this underground city. How could a single person be able to solve all of them? However, in the next moment, this youth in front of her whom Feng Yi looked down on had toppled her understanding. As one mechanism after another was opened, the originally difficult and complicated path of mechanisms was now smooth and unobstructed. Her expression had also changed from the initial contempt to an increasingly shocked one. How did you find out about the method to solve them? Could he be the successor of that ancient sect that disappeared? You want to learn? Zhu Yao turned to glance at her, and casually replied, "It's fine, I can teach you." She was a mighty demigod practitioner. Why would she covet? Don't worry. This is actually rather simple. A childish game like the 9-square grid could be solved even with her eyes closed. But we have to wait until we get out. We have to return and save Fatty first. Zhu Yao added. So Zhu Yao really wanted to teach her. Feng Yi's expression instantly changed, and she could no longer find the high mountain flower from earlier. Along the way, Zhu Yao solved 4 to 5 9-square grids. She was even beginning to suspect if there were other transmigrators who had come to this world before. Otherwise, why would there be so many familiar checkpoints? Finally, they returned to the empty room from before. Probably because they had solved the mechanisms, the ground which was initially cracked open had once again returned to its original state, and it was impossible to tell that there was once a huge hole. In order to avoid the tragedy from before, this time, Zhu Yao lay on the surrounding walls, and like a crab, she moved horizontally towards the opposite passage. Feng Yi, who was following behind, was unclear of the situation, and thought that this was another type of mechanism. She silently followed behind, and began to move horizontally. Zhu Yao, who had accidentally tricked this goddess. Chapter 75. Honestly speaking, seeing the flower of the high mountain pass by the wall with the posture of a crab, this scene was unexpectedly rather satisfying. Cuckoo. Fatty is right in front. Zhu Yao faked a few coughs, desperately trying to hold back her wild laughter that was about to be exposed. Pretending to be anxious, she sprinted towards the fatty, and when she saw Zidan, who was still stuck in the middle of the wall, she finally could not help but hit the ground and laugh out wildly. Ha 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 ha. It seemed like in this lifetime, whenever she meets Feng Yi, she would think of the crab goddess. Feng Yi was startled, glancing at Zidan, who was in a dilemma, as though she had found the reason for her loss of composure. Her cold face could not help but raise the corner of her lips. Little brother, stop teasing me. Zidan, who was still stuck in the wall, similarly thought that he was the main character, and a little embarrassment surfaced on his face. I have already been stuck for almost 2 hours. Hurry and push your big brother out. This was truly a beautiful misunderstanding. You wait. Ha 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 ha. What should she do? She simply could not stop. Feng Yi shook her head. Immediately raising her hand, she circulated her spiritual energy, and with a palm strike, she instantly sent Zidan, who was stuck in the wall, flying. After rolling twice, he finally stopped. Fatty Zidan crawled up unscathed. Patting the dust on his body, he cupped his hands and bowed. Thank you, Senior Martial Ant. Amen. Feng Yi nodded as a reply. Zhu Yao finally had enough of laughing. Let's go. She wondered how Xiaoyi was doing. They did not encounter Chen Zi, but it did not mean that he had the same luck. Wait a minute. Feng Yi suddenly frowned. A look of disgust flashed past her face. Someone is currently heading this way. It's Chen Zi. Perfect timing. Zidan coldly snorted. Just when he was worried about not being able to find him, he had walked right into their trap. Senior Martial Brother. Zhu Yao pulled him. After all, this is his territory. It's best if we don't directly clash with him. Earlier, quite a lot of your spiritual energy was absorbed by that stone wall. And right now, you might not be his opponent either. Furthermore, Sovereign is injured as well. Zidan turned to look at Feng Yi and nodded. Nodding his head. Their mission was to save Sovereign Feng Yi, and this place was not suitable to treat Sovereign's injuries. There's another path nearby. Feng Yi spoke a little hesitantly, but the ancient formations on that path are even more complicated and hard to deal with. Venerable one, don't worry. Little brother Jiang is proficient in these mechanisms. There's no problem at all. Before Zhu Yao could even speak up, Zidan had already patted the fats on his chest, causing them to tremble. Hey, don't agree so easily. If it's not a 9-checkered Gomoku, I'm angry with you. Feng Yi nodded her head, and turned to look at the wall that Fatty was stuck on earlier. Pressing on a brick with a different color, a teleportation formation immediately appeared on the wall. So the teleportation formation was hidden there. No wonder she did not see it. As expected of a demigod, Feng Yi's divine sense was indeed powerful, to the point where she could even detect the passageway hidden behind the formation. Not long after the three of them passed through the teleportation array, then, there was the sound of a large number of demonic beasts running. It was a huge commotion. It seemed like Chun-Zi had already discovered that Feng Yi had escaped. That was why he released the demonic beast puppet to chase after him. The three of them discussed for a while, and decided to meet up with Xiaoyi first, and then leave the underground city first. What Feng Yi said was right. This passageway indeed had more mechanisms than the previous one. Basically, after walking for half an incense's worth of time, one would encounter one. Moreover, it was no longer low-end puzzles and Gamoku. Instead, it was Lianlian and Bubble Bobble Apui. That's not right. There were even more 9 squares, and even 5 squares and 7 squares had appeared as well. The difficulty had increased a little as well. It was no longer the simplest 9 squares. However, to a science graduate like Zhu Yao, it was merely the difference of spending 2 or 3 minutes. She completely did not need to spend too much effort. If not for the fact that 9 squares was a number game that originated from the ancient times, she would really suspect that someone from the same hometown had crossed over as well. However, Zidan and Feng Yi were even more shocked, as they stared fixedly at her face, as though they could see stars. Forget about Feng Yi. She did not even know when Zidan had learned how to speak so well, and even more exaggerated praises were being thrown at her, as though they were free of charge. Zhu Yao suppressed the corner of her lips that was constantly on the verge of rising. Amen. If she were to praise her one more time, she would feel embarrassed. One more time? Wait a minute. What's there to be happy about solving these elementary school math problems? Zhu Yao was instantly dumbfounded. The center of the underground city should be right in front. Feng Yi pointed to the last 5 squares, and her tone was much gentler than before. The eyes she was looking at Zhu Yao carried an additional hint of praise, though her arrogance remained the same. Zhu Yao spent 3 minutes to solve the last 5 squares, and the sealed wall opened to the 2 sides. As expected, it was the buried city they saw when they entered. As long as they found that puzzle formation, they would be able to return to Yutsong City. Just as the 4 of them were planning to walk out of the passage, they suddenly heard a familiar voice. When I find my master and settle everything, I will bring you away from Yutsong City and head to an otherworldly realm. Are you really willing to bring me away? An enchanting voice asked. At the exit of the passage, 2 figures, one white and one red, appeared. Zhu Yao instinctively felt her heart thumping, and suddenly, she felt as though a melodramatic drama was about to start airing again. Zhu Yao silently glanced at Feng Yi next to her, and as expected, her face instantly paled a little. Cuckoo, Junior Marshal Brother Xiao. Zhu Yao took the initiative to greet him. In the midst of the enemy's camp, she could forget about internal conflicts. After all, she was destined to be cannon fodder. Unfortunately, he did not give her any face and completely ignored her. Instead, he took the initiative to wrap his arms around the woman in red in front of him and continued to confess his love. Of course it's true. How can I let you go now? Hearing that, Ruiyu blushed and lowered her head shyly. Hey, Xiaoyi. Xiaoyi. Zhu Yao waved her hand. Please, even if you want to put on a melodramatic drama, you have to look at the situation first. Feng Yi was here. However, Xiaoyi still did not have any reaction. He hugged Ruiyu even tighter and began to act. Oops. He can't hear you. Zidan angrily shook the flesh on his face and pointed at the exit at the very front of the tunnel. There's still a formation that hasn't been undone. It probably has the effect of isolating aura, so we can see them, but they can't see us. Zhu Yao took a closer look. As expected, there were a few transparent numbers floating in the air at the exit. It was another grid of 9 squares. Just as he was about to undo it and take a closer look, Mama's egg, this grid of 9 squares was a little too big, wasn't it? The grids were even connected to the wall. Zhu Yao wiped off her cold sweat. It would take at least half an hour to undo this. Zhu Yao silently lit a candle for Xiaoyi. The show outside was still going on, and it was even a big erotic show. In the beginning, Xiaoyi was only hugging Ruiyu, but the more he hugged, the lower it went, and gradually, it went towards the indescribable part. The entire scene instantly became hot. The rising and falling sounds of panting could be heard as well. The faces of the other two people in the cave instantly darkened to the bottom of a pot. Humph. Shameless. Zidan simply could not help but scold. Fengyi did not refute, and simply turned her gaze away as well. Her expression was unclear. Seeing that Fengyi's expression was a little ugly, Zhu Yao could not help but persuade her. Actually, Xiaoyi is quite worried about you. Initially, the sect master had arranged for senior martial brother Zidan and I to save you, but he strongly requested for us to come together. As a woman as well, she could only try her best to console her. As expected of a high mountain flower, Fengyi was actually able to hold it in, and did not explode. Instead, her brows furrowed even deeper. Xiaolang, are we not going to look for your master? Ruiyu wrapped her legs around Xiaoyi's waist, and asked as she panted. Xiaoyi was currently in high spirits, and casually replied, "There's no rush right now." Fengyi's face once again darkened. He shouldn't tear down her own act like this. Zhu Yao gave a face. Ho, he's actually very concerned about your safety. Xiaolang, between me and your master, who's more important? Ruiyu once again asked. Naturally, it's you. Alright, she tried her best. Whatever. In any case, my life is yours. Even if others don't care about it in reality, it doesn't have much to do with you either, right? Zhu Yao persuaded a few words, and no longer interrupted, as she seriously unraveled the 9 squares. As she unraveled it, she listened to the music that was constantly ringing in her ears. She was intoxicated as well. Fengyi did not speak the entire time, as she tried her best to maintain her image as a high mountain flower. However, the hands that were getting tighter and tighter by her side had revealed her emotions. Zhu Yao had long known that their master-disciple relationship was not ordinary. Although it had not reached the surface, there was definitely quite a bit of intimacy. It was normal for her to be unable to calm down after personally witnessing a man's betrayal. Fengyi calmed down the anger in her chest. Although she knew that her disciple had always been dissolute, most of the men in the world were like that. And that woman's body was filled with an evil aura. And she was actually a demonic practitioner. Why would her disciple be so entangled with her? In the past, she did not mind about his private matters. However, she never expected that he would actually not conceal it to such an extent. In an instant, layers of anger surged in her heart, filling her heart. In the beginning, her heart, which had always been calm, was stirred into chaos. Only when the person beside her, who was proficient in mechanisms and formations, spoke out to dissuade her, did she instantly calm down. Lowering her head, she looked at the person who was still squatting on the ground, writing and drawing. He was right. Her life was her own. Even if others did not care about it or worry about it, what did it have to do with her? Closing her eyes, the ripples that had just risen in the depths of her heart receded, and she was even calmer than before. A casual sentence from Zhu Yao, who was focused on dealing with the 9 squares, had extinguished the thoughts that Fengyi finally had for Xiaoyi in her heart. Furthermore, antibodies were formed, and they would no longer sprout. The 9 squares were about to be unraveled, and the free show outside had already ended as well. The two of them had long been neatly dressed, and were hugging each other as they sat on the ground. Zhu Yao did not know if it was her imagination, but she felt that the spiritual energy between the two of them was a little dense. Especially Xiaoyi's face was glowing. That's not right. When did Xiaoyi's cultivation reach the 3rd level of nascent soul? Chapter 76. Zhu Yao suddenly recalled the predecessor of Ruiyu's mystic art. Could it be that she used a pair cultivation art? Ruiyu was a demigod, and she was an entire realm higher than Xiaoyi. If she were to undergo double pair, it would not be impossible for Xiaoyi to continuously rise by 2 ranks. No wonder he wanted to seize all the time he had to have sex with Ruiyu. He had even thrown the task of finding his master out of his mind. It seemed that his brain was not as simple as being overwhelmed by sperm. Then was his feelings for Ruiyu real or fake? Zhu Yao could not figure it out, and for a moment, she felt her head aching a little. She was really not good at things like scheming and plotting against one another. Rather than thinking about these, she might as well solve the 9-palace grid. Just as he was about to have Zidan turn the final number on the grid into a rune, suddenly, a loud sound rang out from the outside. A 6th-ranked demonic beast came out of nowhere, pouncing towards Xiao Yi and Ruiyu. A mere rank 6 demonic beast naturally couldn't hurt them. The two of them dodged and retreated 3 feet away. Ruiyu shot out a wind blade, and the demonic beast was cut into 2 halves. Chenzi, you're finally willing to come out. Ruiyu sneered and looked at the black gas floating in the sky. A man who was as skinny as a skeleton appeared in the middle of the black chi, and there were faint black marks on his withered face. It was actually Chenzi. Zhu Yao recalled for a moment. Back then, when he was abducting people in Ancient Hill Sect, he clearly wasn't like this. In just a few short days, why did he become like this? Where's Fengyi? Where was Fengyi? Where did you hide her? Chen Zai's eyes bulged out. His face was filled with madness as he interrogated. Ruiyu looked at his appearance, and her eyes flashed with ruthlessness. I told you long ago. That is a remnant page of the ancient demon race's cultivation method. It will corrode the body, so how can a human cultivator cultivate it? Yet, in order to obtain that woman, you forcefully continued to practice and even attacked me. Serves him right. He doesn't look like a human or a demon. Shut up. Shut up. Chen Zi became even more frenzied. Black smoke gathered in his hands, and immediately, 4 demonic beasts appeared to attack. Ruiyu and Xiaoyi took 2 each, and once again, they easily dealt with them. You don't want to hear it, but I want to say it. Ruiyu sneered. Look at what you've become now. Forget about the Feng Yi of the cultivation world. Even ordinary people would feel disgusted when they see you. No, it won't. Feng Yi will like me, she will. Chen Zi had completely gone crazy. Scratching the loose skin on his face, he suddenly thought of something. He took out something from his side and muttered to himself, I have this. They can definitely cure me. As long as I gather enough people, I can cultivate a body that will never rot. Water spirit, Xiao Yi's eyes shone, and he could not help but exclaim out. A hint of wild joy flashed past his face. Zhu Yao recognized it as well, because the moment he took out the water spirit, the wood spirit in her divine sense let out a chick sound and woke up. Tell me where she is. If you don't speak, I'll kill you. Chen Zi's expression changed, and he urged the black smoke around his body to attack. Xiao Yi and Ruiyu dodged in time. The moment the ground came into contact with the black miasma, a huge pit was instantly corroded out, swallowing half of the underground city, and black bubbles were even emitting out from the pit. Zhu Yao was shocked as well. Earlier, she basically did not see him circulating any spiritual energy at all. What was this? Xiao Yi and Ruiyu had no choice but to fly up, and Chen Zi once again attacked. Although he was only a nascent soul paragon, and his cultivation was far from Ruiyu's. However, it was unknown if it was because the mystic art he was training in was too strange. Ruiyu could not gain any advantage in his hands either. Especially that thick black smoke. The two of them did not dare to approach. However, the suppression of the realm was absolute. After a long period of time, Chen Zi revealed a fatigued look, and his aura began to become unstable as well. With a wave of his hand, he once again materialized a dozen or so demonic beasts, and dragged the two of them back a short distance. Taking out the water spirit, he circulated his spiritual energy, planning to recover the spiritual energy he lost. Ruiyu saw through his intentions, and her expression turned cold. Suddenly, she materialized thousands of icicles, and shot them out. Most of them were blocked by the demonic beasts, however. An extremely small ice blade pierced through, and coincidentally hit the water spirit in Chen Zi's hand, and instantly froze the water spirit. A hint of a smile leaked out from Ruiyu's lips. Retracting her hand, the water spirit instantly flew towards her. Return my water spirit. Chen Zi was furious. Materializing black smoke, he struck straight towards the water spirit. The icicles instantly melted, but the black miasma did not dissipate, and headed straight towards Ruiyu. She could only retreat and dodge. The water spirit fell from the sky. Coincidentally, Zhu Yao had unlocked the final square at this moment. The passageway was too narrow. She was really worried that if Chen Zi were to throw a ball of black smoke over, they would all be wiped out. The most important thing is, little water spirit, I'm here. Just as she was planning to head out, a figure flashed past, and the falling water spirit was caught by Feng Yi. Zhu Yao. Master. Xiaoyi delightfully took 2 steps forward. Feng Yi, you're back. Chen Zi was even more overjoyed. Even the drooping skin on his face began to tremble as he looked at Feng Yi in the sky with infatuation. Feng Yi frowned, however. She did not care about Xiao Yi. She simply looked coldly at the other person below, who had lost all rationality. In the next moment, the pressure of a demigod was completely released. The moment Zhu Yao walked out of the passageway, she was pressed to the ground. The hell? Even if you want to take revenge, don't attack indiscriminately. Chen Zi was forced to kneel on the ground by the pressure as well, however, as though he did not feel it at all. He raised his head and looked at Feng Yi with infatuation. As he muttered her name, he struggled to stand up and wanted to approach her. The killing intent on Feng Yi's face grew thicker, and she said word by word, "You deserve to die." Feng Yi. Chen Zi, however, was still looking at her, as though he did not hear her words, and he even revealed an extremely strange smile. Feng Yi immediately summoned her own intent sword, a scarlet-red sword of light. She mercilessly raised her hand and threw it straight towards Chen Zi. However, Chen Zi did not resist and did not even dodge. His chest was pierced by Feng Yi's sword intent. Yet, that strange smile still hung on his face, and his smile grew even deeper. This is good as well. We can finally be together, ha ha ha. Flames strangely emitted from his body. However, they were black flames, and his strange smile could be seen everywhere in the sky. Zhu Yao suddenly had a bad premonition. Just at the moment when Chen Zi was burnt into ashes by the black flames, the wood spirit in Feng Yi's hands suddenly flashed with a black light, and a gigantic black hole appeared behind her. Before anyone could react, it sucked her in. Master. Xiaoyi was greatly shocked. He reached out his hand, only to grab onto empty air. The hell, water spirit? Don't. Zhu Yao flew up, pounced forward, and coincidentally grabbed onto Feng Yi's hand, the water spirit in her hands. And then, they fell into it together. Feng Yi widened her eyes as she looked at him in disbelief. Just as Zhu Yao was about to speak, a ton of fat meat suddenly smashed onto her back, and she almost puked out a mouthful of blood. The hell, fatty, what are you doing? The moment they fell into the black hole, a huge pressure came, and the 3 of them lost consciousness at the same time. Yu Yan's mood these few days was a little bad. In order to find the water spirit, that stupid disciple of his had decided to hide her identity and search for an opportunity. Although he was worried, at the very least, they were in his own sect, and he could take care of them a little. Hence, he allowed her to do as she pleased. However, in the first few days, his disciple was still looking for opportunities to report to him about the situation. However, in the past few days, she had suddenly stopped coming. For 4 consecutive days, he did not even see the shadow of his stupid disciple. His master was very angry, and the consequences were very severe. After pondering for a moment, he decided to first call for her with the celestial crane. In the end, the celestial crane flew 1 round around Ancient Hill Sect, and then it flew back. His disciple still did not appear. Yu Yan's brows furrowed even more. Finally, he could not help but release his divine sense, and the scene of the entire Ancient Hill Sect instantly entered his eyes. However, he did not see his disciple's figure. Not in the house, not in the beast-taming mountain, and even more so not in Ancient Hill Sect. Yu Yan felt his heart skip a beat. He seemed to have lost his disciple again. Zhu Yao, who had just woken up, looked at the grayish-white scene in front of her, and could not help but beat her chest and stomp her feet again. She just knew that nothing good would come out of following that Xiao Yi. And he even had the all-party members die buff. She was definitely going to have a life of cannon fodder. So was this the rhythm of Zhu Yao 4.0 coming online? You're awake. A gentle female voice resounded next to her. The voice carried a hint of hesitation. Zhu Yao turned to look, And it was actually Feng Yi. It can't be party resurrection? No, wait. Zhu Yao looked at her surroundings, and just happened to see a lump of flesh was currently pressing down on her leg. Fatty. In that case, she did not die. Zhu Yao thought of this possibility in hindsight. She was actually still alive. For a moment, she was both sad and happy, and she did not even know how to react. This was way too damn touching. Why did you jump in as well? Feng Yi suddenly asked out of nowhere, and looked straight at her, as though the answer to this question was very important to her. Zhu Yao turned around. Feng Yi's expression changed, and she continued to ask, I'm not related to you in any way, nor do I have any sort of relationship with you. Why did you? If I don't save you, am I supposed to watch you die? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at her. Was there a need to ask such a question? Of course, her main goal was still Shui Ling, and saving her was just a convenience. Feng Yi was stumped by his words, and her expression changed. Just as she was about to continue asking, Zidan suddenly woke up. His large fats trembled for a moment, and he raised his head. Little brother. Zidan was startled. Are you all right? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. If you had moved down from my leg, I would have been fine. His leg was about to be crushed, you know? Only then did Zidan realize that he had fallen onto her leg. With an embarrassed smile, he crawled up. Little brother, do you know where this is? Zidan looked a little dumbfoundedly at the grayish-white ground in front of him. Zhu Yao rubbed her leg that was numb from the pressure, and shook her head. That Chen Zi must have done something to Shui Ling, which was why we were teleported here. Just thinking about it, this isn't a good place. This place was barren, and between the heaven and earth, everything was grayish-white. There wasn't the slightest bit of life, which was why she misunderstood that she had died once again, and returned to the time when she was being reborn. There's no spiritual energy here, Feng Yi said. What? Zidan was startled, and he suddenly widened his eyes. How is this possible? How can there be a place without spiritual energy in this world? It's only the strength of the spiritual energy, unless it's... Could it be? Zidan's eyes widened even more, and his face was filled with disbelief. Feng Yi, however, nodded, and his expression instantly turned grayish-white. Speak clearly, just what in the world is this place? There's still a spectator who doesn't know the truth here, hey? Chapter 77. Little brother. Zidan let out a heavy sigh. This is the desolate lands. The wilderness? What does that mean? The wildlands is the battlefield of the primordial fiend gods. Zidan explained. Since the primordial era, it had already been sealed. This place was lacking in spiritual energy, and not even a blade of grass grew here. It was a land of death. Legend has it that no man or beast could survive here. In ancient times, Yutsong City was connected to this place, but after the seal, no one found the entrance. In other words, we can't get out. Zhu Yao was dumbfounded. If that was the case, they might as well just die. Amen. Zidan nodded affirmatively. Zhu Yao suddenly missed version 4.0 a little. Ever since they started talking about the desolate lands, Feng Yi had stopped speaking. Instead, she began to meditate at the side, reverting back to the appearance of a flower on a high mountain. Zhu Yao lightly sighed. That Chen Zai had long gone insane, and he had been yearning for Feng Yi all this while. He had finally managed to obtain her with all his might. Yet, in just a few days, she ran away again. It was no wonder that even if they were to die, they still wanted to scam her, sending Feng Yi to this place where one could only enter and not exit. Most likely, they had the thought of perishing together with her, right? However, they never expected that they two cannon fodders would be added in as well. Cannon fodder number 1 pushed cannon fodder number 2. Senior brother, since that Chen Zi was able to send us in, he must have a way to get out, right? She remembered that she was sucked in by a black hole, and the formation of the black hole was somewhat similar to a formation. Originally there was. Zidan sighed. Sovereign Feng Yi is a demigod stage practitioner. If she were to give it her all, she would be able to tear open the void and return to the cultivation world. But now, martial Uncle Feng has yet to recover from her injuries, and there is no spiritual qi in this world, so I can't heal you. That is to say, as long as her injuries are healed. Zhu Yao said. Little brother, could it be that you have a way? Zidan was delighted. Did you forget that I also have a wood spirit root? I don't have spiritual energy, but I can transfer spiritual energy to her. Wasn't this one of the missions that she was sent here for? Absolutely not. Zidan said. With your nascent soul cultivation, the spiritual qi in your body won't be able to heal Martial Uncle's injuries. Moreover, if you exhaust your spiritual qi in this world, you will be in danger. So serious? Zhu Yao was speechless. She seemed to have emptied her spiritual energy several times, but she was fine. Sigh. If I had known earlier, I would have healed Martial Uncle before coming out. Zidan sighed. It was a pity that money could not buy one's foresight. That Chen Zi sure is ruthless. Even at death's door, he still wanted to drag Senior Martial Uncle along with him. Zhu Yao glanced at Feng Yi, who was currently pretending to be pretentious and meditating. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. Senior Martial Brother, can we use the water spirit to heal her? Zhu Yao suggested. Zidan slapped his head. That's right, how could I have forgotten about this? Water spiritual energy is the most gentle and most suitable for healing injuries. With the assistance of the water spiritual energy, little brother may not need to use all of his spiritual energy to heal Martial Uncle. There's no time to lose. Let's start now. Brother, be careful. Just do your best, don't force yourself. Zhu Yao nodded and walked to Feng Yi's side. He sat down cross-legged. Venerable One, can I borrow the water spirit? I'll heal you first, and I'll return it to you when I'm done. Feng Yi opened her eyes. Naturally, she had heard the conversation earlier as well, and she did not hesitate. He handed over the water spirit and closed his eyes again. Zhu Yao unceremoniously took the water spirit from her hands and stored it in her divine sense. As soon as Shui Ling entered, the wood spirit excitedly began to circle around it, chirping as it circled. On the other hand, Shui Ling didn't show any reaction. It was as quiet as a blue gem. After much difficulty, she finally managed to pacify the wood spirit and instructed it to convert the spiritual energy in its body into wood spiritual energy, and then through the water spirit, convert it into healing spiritual energy of the water attribute. Reaching out her hand, she wanted to transfer it into Feng Yi's body. However, she was blocked by the robe she was wearing. Zhu Yao frowned. She instinctively leaned forward, and with a whoosh, she pulled open the mystic robe in front of her chest. Feng Yi fiercely opened her eyes, and without any hesitation, she swung a slap towards Zhu Yao's face. The hell? Zhu Yao could not help but curse out, as she retaliated with a slap. You! Feng Yi looked at him with a face of disbelief. She did not know if she was shocked that he had stripped off her clothes, or that he had slapped the #1 beauty in the cultivation world. You dare? Do you want to die? You're wearing so much, how am I supposed to heal you? Heal me if you want. This old lady here was not even willing to serve her anymore. Initially, she was already in a bad mood when she was forcefully dragged here to save Zhu Yao. Ever since they met, the other party even put on an attitude of "it's your fortune that I'm willing to let you guys save me. Why aren't you guys kneeling and licking my feet?" Just who did she offend? She was in a rush to slap her face. Senior Martial Aunt, don't misunderstand. Seeing that the situation was not right, Zidan immediately came out to smooth things over. This mystic robe of yours is able to block healing arts. Little brother has no choice but to do so. Only then did Feng Yi's expression soften a little. However, she still looked at the man in front of her a little indignantly, as though she was suppressing the anger in the depths of her heart with all her might. She then pulled open a corner of her robe, revealing a palm-sized inner robe, and angrily turned her head around. Zhu Yao silently rolled her eyes. It's not like he's Chen Zi, and he thought he cared about looking at you? What you have, I have had it before as well, twice. Amen. Other than her breasts. Taking a deep breath, she once again gathered some water and with spiritual energy, and then cast a healing art. Reaching out her palm, she placed it on her shoulder, and tried her best to repair the damaged meridians in her body. Zidan had long turned around to protect her at the side to avoid arousing suspicion. Only after Zhu Yao injected spiritual energy into Feng Yi's body did she realize how deep that Chen Zi's obsession with Feng Yi was, and how ruthless he was in his attacks. The few large meridians in her body were all damaged, and spiritual energy was currently scattering in all directions. It was fortunate that she was able to endure such injuries and follow them around the underground city, as expected of a practitioner who was able to cultivate to the demigod stage. She was really good at enduring. Thinking about the reason why she was able to forcefully summon her sword intent and kill Chen Zi with such a body, it was also because of her pride as a demigod stage practitioner. It was also because of her pride as a soul formation cultivator. Being kidnapped this time was probably a great humiliation to her. Zhu Yao silently retracted the disdain she had for her earlier. On this point, Zhu Yao respected her for being a man. She began to attentively help her repair her meridians. After spending exactly 6 hours, Zhu Yao only managed to repair a large portion of her meridians, and only the last large meridian had yet to be connected. This meridian was especially important. Once it was repaired, it could not be interrupted, otherwise, all her previous efforts would be wasted. Just when Zhu Yao was halfway through her repair, a series of rumbling sounds could be heard from afar. In the beginning, she could only faintly hear some noises, but in the end, the thunderous sounds grew louder and louder, as though an army was pressing down on them. Zidan fiercely stood up. This is a beast wave. A beast wave of demonic beasts. The hell? What happened to the promised desolate land? What happened to the promised place where humans and beasts could not survive? What the hell? Little brother, don't be anxious. It's just a mere beast wave, leave it to me. Zidan patted on his chest and said with an expression of, I'm here for everything. Focus on healing, Zhu Yao. I will definitely not let those demonic beasts take a step closer to you. After saying that, he summoned his flying sword and hurriedly flew several meters forward. Before Zhu Yao could even feel touched, a few seconds later, Zidan ran back and even shouted as he ran. Little brother, hurry and run. The hell? What happened to the promised, I'm here for everything? Zhu Yao was dumbfounded. 10th ranked demonic beasts. Zidan turned his head and shouted as he ran. A large group of 10th ranked demonic beasts. 10th ranked. And a group at that. Zhu Yao made a prompt decision and hugged onto Feng Yi next to her. As she continuously poured out spiritual energy, she summoned her flying sword and flew on it. Zidan, who was still running wildly, slapped his head. I forgot that I can fly as well. He flew on his flying sword as well. However, the demonic beasts behind them seemed to have set their sights on them, as they chased after them while howling. Their momentum was so great that even the sky was filled with the dust they brought up, as though the entire world was trembling. Zhu Yao basically did not dare to turn her head back. In the first place, flying on a flying sword in a world without spiritual energy like this was already very difficult, and she just had to bring someone along. What's even worse was that she had to continuously pour out spiritual energy. Slowly, she was already losing her strength. However, the beast wave still did not give up. After flying for an entire hour, they were still unable to shake them off. There's a narrow valley in front. Zidan pointed to the bare cliff in front of them. Let's hide in there. All right. Zhu Yao followed after him. However, before entering, she secretly released Sesame. A mere narrow valley most likely would not be able to stop a group of 10th ranked demonic beasts. She could only hope that Sesame's 11th ranked identity would be able to intimidate them. Zidan led the way to the deepest part of the narrow valley and hurriedly laid down a presence-concealing formation. The moment Zhu Yao landed on the ground, Feng Yi, who had been supporting her, puked out a mouthful of blood. Oh no! Zhu Yao hurriedly sat down once again and frantically circulated the spiritual energy in her body to wrap around her damaged meridians. She was already as tired as a dog in the first place, and this action had undoubtedly consumed even more of her spiritual energy. Her head was already drenched in sweat. Feng Yi opened her eyes, looked at him with an unknown meaning, and then closed them once again. Fortunately, she was in time, and the spiritual energy did not go out of control and cause a backlash to the other meridians, which were already in good condition. Zhu Yao silently heaved a sigh of relief and calmed her heart to complete the final task. An hour later, the top of the narrow valley suddenly quietened down until the terrifying roars of beasts could no longer be heard. It seems like the beast wave has already left. Zidan heaved a sigh of relief. Zhu Yao was finally done repairing her meridians as well, and the spiritual energy in her body was almost exhausted as well. Her body tilted, and she collapsed onto the ground, unable to get up. "Little brother." Zidan hurriedly went forward to support her. Fengyi opened her eyes, glanced at Zhu Yao, and cast a soothing mystic art on her. Biting her lower lips, she said a moment later, "Thank you, Amen." Zhu Yao was so tired that she no longer had the strength to speak. "Senior Martial Ant, please hurry and return to the cultivation world," Zidan anxiously said. "There's no spiritual energy here, little brother. I'm afraid you won't be able to hold on for long." Fengyi clenched her fists, turned around and cast an art. The spiritual energy in her entire body began to circulate, and a huge gale blew. With a wave of her hand, she forcefully slashed in the air, and a black hole floated 5 feet in front of her. Fengyi, who had used up all of her spiritual energy, was a little unable to endure it as well. She took 2 steps back, and then she walked towards that black hole. "Let's go." She once again turned to look at Zhu Yao, and then she walked into the black hole. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.